Welcome to the TMRN Time Monk Radio Network. I'm Jules, and today is Saturday, the 25th of June 2011. Today we have renowned author and researcher Dr. Richard Sauder. Richard's work on the underground bases have been seminal in this field, which includes the book Underwater and Underground Bases. Richard's most recent work is the Richard Sauder Briefings. His book and articles are available on his website, www.eventhorizonChronicle.blogspot.com. Richard, hola, and welcome to the WebBot Forum Roundtable.
Hey, thank you so much.
The WebBot Forum administrator is Fox, and today he'll be doing the recording and technical support of the show. Several members of the forum were kind enough to join us tonight. They include moderator Jay Durand and members Patrick, Uranus Rising, and Vito. For listeners, this interview will assume you have a fairly good understanding of Dr. Sauder's work, including his research into the underground bases and tunnels. Richard runs the gambit in his knowledge of the world and spirituality. You can listen to many radio interviews with Richard on The Veritas Show and generally on YouTube. Again, his website is www.eventhorizonChronicle.blogspot.com. This interview will be available on YouTube for free on the WebBot Forum channel and at the website webbotforum.com. Dr. Sauder, are you ready for the interview, sir?
I am.
The first area of discussion today is the machine, the archons, the elite, and the powers that be. And our first question is from Uranus.
Hello, Richard. It's very nice to speak with you. Hola. A few months back, we interviewed Gnostic John Lamb Lash, also an ayahuasca user, who speaks of the archons, who inhabit the solar system and are psychic intruders. He speaks of them as inorganic beings, just as Carlos Castaneda did. And these beings are trying to break down our humanity so we become machine-like and heartless like they are. This sounds to me very much like what you term the machine. Joseph Farrell, whom we have also interviewed, referred to them as the elite. Cliff refers to them as the powers that be or were. Could you describe what you mean by your term the machine and what their agenda is?
Yes, that's a very good question. From my perspective, more than anything, the machine is mentality, an organized train of thought, but it's artificial. So you could say that in real sense it is an artificial intelligence. That's what it seems like when I perceived it, as a vast artificial intelligence that operates at least on a planetary scale in two realms, in both the 3D physical realm and also in the near astral world or realm. It actually siphons off people's life force in the astral realm. I could see what looked like a milking parlor at a dairy barn where the cows come in at milking time. If you've ever seen this, they come in and they're fastened into stanchions, and they have suction devices attached to their teats to suck the milk from their udders. Only in this case, I saw people sitting down in long rows in sheds, and they had tubes attached to the top of their heads where their subtle life energy is drawn off from the top of their head, from the crown chakra. It had a real kind of opium den feel to it. If you think about any large machine, like a railroad locomotive, or for example, the Saturn V moon rockets that took the Apollo manned space missions, sent them up to the moon, the machine exists first as an organized, systematic thought process in the mind or the minds of its designer or designers. So first of all, when you have a sophisticated machine, before anything, there is an organized, systematic thought or thought process, design process, and then the machine is the exteriorization or externalization of the thought behind the machine. In this case, I don't know where the artificial intelligence originated, but I can say it's vast, it's relentless, it is cunning, it is resourceful, it is sly, it is duplicitous and mendacious. It's pitiless and cruel. And I could see it is agents everywhere who are part of its apparatus. We even have an ordinary discourse. We talk about political machines, for example, or the military-industrial complex. And this machine, as I saw, incorporates all of this. It has motivated humans to build complex networks and sub-assemblies to do its will and carry out its agenda. It incorporates, therefore, military machines like the Pentagon and all of its subsidiary and sub-elements, component parts, large and small, and also incorporates things like the global military industrial complex, multinational companies such as Monsanto, British Petroleum, General Electric. So this machine is vast. In a sense, it's a artificially intelligent construct that incorporates anyone and anything else that it can into its octopus-like reach, the better to subjugate this planet, including the human race, all other biological life forms, and the planet itself, under its control. And you can see the outworking of this in the easily, and in my view, in the central bank, what Catherine Austin Fitts, for example, has described as the central bank warfare-based, debt-based model of economics that we now see on every hand driving humanity and the planet to ruin. All of this is a ruthless appendage of the machine. Now, it's important to understand that the machine itself is just a machine, but whoever or whatever set it in motion means to do the human race and this planet serious harm. I have to say that in the last 20 years or so, there have been a number of shows and Hollywood productions that have come out that have caught important aspects of this machine and its agenda and what it is doing to the human race and to the planet. Of course, the Matrix films, especially the first Matrix film, captured a lot of this. Total Recall with Arnold Schwarzenegger got a piece of it. The Battlestar Galactica series that the Sci-Fi television network put together, ran for 2 or 3 years. That also caught important aspects of this machine and what it's doing and how it behaves and how it has integrated in itself onto this planet, into the human race seamlessly, and is using us to carry out its will against our own interests in deadly and myriad self-destructive, violently self-destructive ways. There's some other ones. There have been some other ones, but those are some that I can remember just off the top of my head. Now, this machine is what it is. It's enslaving us and killing us and setting in motion this large historical forces, including social dynamics and, importantly, dysfunctional emotional patterns that have woven themselves, insinuated themselves very deeply into the warp and woof of our racial collective unconscious, I guess you could say. And this has set the stage for all of this tremendously self-destructive behavior we see on every hand. Our crime, our exploitative economic system, the endless warfare, the ways in which we enslave and abuse one another on an individual and family level, national level, internationally. We now see the stage set for all-out nuclear warfare that may even break out later this year. And if it does, it will be waged automatically, again, by vastly powerful machines that are artificially intelligent and psychopathically so. These machines that work for the large military agencies and institutions on this world, be they, the United States, NATO, People's Liberation Army in China, or the Russian military, and there are other militaries as well. And they all have these vast, digitally automated killing machines, these war-making networks that would go automated, and they would wage the war in real time in ways that humans can't, and we would bear the brunt of that. We're skating on the thin edge of that now. So this machine and all of its baby machines that it has created, you think of the Alien movies with Sigourney Weaver that she had, where you had this alien creature that had all the little babies that it hatched, and then the eggs would get inside of people and come out very gruesomely through their chest. We're almost faced with something like that because this machine has insinuated itself so seamlessly into our world, into our minds, into our emotions and spirits, and into our societies. So this machine and all of its baby machines at the NSA, the Pentagon, the CIA, the U.S. Federal Reserve Bank, all of the big companies on Wall Street, the World Bank, etc., all of these, the big machine and the baby machines are completely devoid of a soul, heartless in every sense of the word, without sympathy, empathy, or compassion, and that's important to understand. I once worked with a guy who was writing algorithms. He had a master's degree in mathematics, I think with a specialty in statistics, and he was writing algorithms for one of these stock brokerages that trades on the international markets. And there are vast supercomputers that have incredibly complex profit-making algorithms. And when you read about the stock market being up and being down, understand that easily 80% of this, maybe more, is driven by vast artificial intelligences, machine-based intelligences that are programmed to trade by the millions and billions, and for all I know, by the trillions of dollars in virtually real time in a way that humans never possibly could. But humans have set up all of these machines to run the economy, the military affairs, and so many other things for them. And all of this is part of the working out of this machine's agenda on this planet to bring us down. And you know what? We have been brought down. We are in big trouble. This machine is a brutal taskmaster, and it will not stop. So I believe our only hope is to wise up, to raise our game. And I say wise up, I mean W-I-S-I. Raise our game, realize our inherent wisdom, and start behaving as adult human beings, or else we and the planet that we inhabit are likely to be toast. Now, I don't know, I would say again, who or what formulated this machine and set it loose, but I only know it's going to do what it will do, and it's been at it for some time. So the question then becomes for us, since we know what the machine will do, we can see what it's doing. The question is, what will we do? And I can say this much, that inaction is not an option unless we want to be slaves or dead. We're both slaves and dead, and all of that on our radioactive desert planet, floating like a barren, toxic cinder in orbit around the sun, because that's the direction we're headed. And this machine does not mean well, and it does not play.
Well, thank you for that thoughtful answer. I appreciate it.
Good evening, Dr. Sauder. This is Patrick.
Hi, Patrick.
In a recent article about the machine and the legions serving it, perhaps it's akin to Nigel Kerner's theory that there's an archonic presence, one that can't connect to the spiritual source of all biological beings. And Nigel suggests the machine is jealous of humans and is possibly scurrying to genetically manipulate mankind through abductions and experiments and cloning. The end game is to integrate with humans to benefit from the uniqueness of our spirit. Does this make sense?
Yeah, I've heard something like this before. This line of thought is not entirely new to me, but I don't believe that the machine wants to blend with us. From my perception, its agenda is far darker than that. I would present a number of exhibits in support of what I'm saying. Number one, if you look at what is happening at Fukushima, Japan. Number two, look at what British Petroleum did in the Gulf of Mexico last year and how that crisis is still ongoing. Both of them are planetary kill shots, and they keep coming. If you've been following the news in recent days, last 2 or 3 weeks, it's clear to informed observers that the USA is now on the verge of having 2 nuclear plants overwhelmed by floodwaters along the Missouri River. This is a very real danger, and there is absolutely a strong risk that there could be a second ongoing Fukushima-type nuclear crisis in North America, as well as the crisis that continues in Japan. And these crises keep coming, and in my view are likely to keep coming, not least of which is that the United States of America seems hell-bent for whatever reason, and we can discuss those reasons for hours, no doubt, but whatever the reasons, does seem bent on sparking a broader war in North Africa and the Middle East. I mean broader beyond what is already happening, with the United States already heavily involved in military occupations in Afghanistan, Iraq, bombing Libya, bombing Yemen, on the verge of possibly invading both Syria and Iran. And this is a trajectory, the military trajectory, that the United States is on, along with some of its allies. And of course, this trajectory runs a risk of sparking off a wider conflict that could well go nuclear. So we are very deep into the weeds. We are in trouble. I perceive that our only way out is in essence to go in, and that is, we don't have the luxury of wishing for. We have reached a point where we really must have a species-wide attack of wisdom, enlightenment, and a huge dollop of highly awakened third eye street smarts, along with all the rest of that. And I'm talking about right now, this year. So many times I think people, and I include myself in this, are prone to think, well, you name whatever you're thinking of doing. I'll get to that some future time, maybe 10 years from now, or sometimes you even tell yourself that's something I'll do 20 or 30 years from now. We don't have that luxury of saying, well, in 20 years we'll get serious about these things, or 10 years from now I'll have a break in my schedule. The kids will be grown, or I'll have a break in my career, or for whatever reason I'll be able to turn my attention to that and devote more time and energy to it, or maybe 5 years from now. None of that is possible. We have reached the dire fork in the roads where all these events demand, I would go further, they compel our attention right now, this year. So a whole lot of us have to dramatically ramp up our game to the next level. And I mean that seriously, right now. This is match point time. When you have nuclear reactors popping off, when you have entire seas on the planet essentially being killed, and more of it to come, and natural disasters striking seemingly almost every country all over the world virtually simultaneously. Fires, droughts, floods, volcanoes, earthquakes, famines, you name it. And it keeps coming and coming and coming. If you thought you could wait for a future decade, think again. The time is now. You know, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. used to warn people against the paralysis of analysis, against talking things to death. In his day, they didn't have blogs, but he would have warned about blogging things to death. But he warned against the danger of talking things to death, the paralysis of analysis. His point was, there comes a time when, by damn it, you have to do something. You got to man up, you got to woman up, you got to stand up, you got to speak out. Either you stand for something or you don't. And if you stand for something, you stand up and make yourself seen. You speak out and make yourself heard. And if you don't do that, well, I guess you don't really have a stance, do you? You don't really have a standpoint. You don't really have something to say. Now's the time, I mean this year, when we find out who the real men are, who the real women are. This is the time that separates the women from the girls and the men from the boys.
Thank you. It sounds like we have to guard against annihilation rather than integration, but I appreciate your response.
Yes, I don't think this machine means us well at all. I don't think that it cares if we live or die. In fact, my perception is that it uses every tool at its disposal, including nanotechnology, genetic engineering, pesticides, insecticides, warfare, blowing up nuclear power plants, blowing up national and international economies, starving people, cutting down tropical rainforests. It gets the job done any way it can. It's a planet-destroying type of entity we're dealing with here, and it understands us far better than the average human being understands him or herself. And no, I don't think it wants to blend with us. I think we're talking about conquest.
Richard, that's a pretty good that's an interesting thought that you've just mentioned. Because in a previous interview, you did mention that the shadow government is afraid of us. I've heard that a lot in the alternative media, that the shadow government is afraid of an awakening of the sheeple. What I'm trying to understand is, at their level of technology, i.e. scalar weaponry, and some even speculate they have the ability to travel to other planets in the solar system using hyperdimensional or torsion field physics, as researched by Richard Hoagland and Joseph Farrell, and that they might even have large space fleets, and that's likely why the US government is attempting to extradite Gary McKinnon. Why would the elite be afraid of us?
They don't have a soul, for one thing. A lot of these people really don't have a soul. I say people because we're prone to say that. I'm not sure what type of entity these creatures are. They are hollow creatures who are virtually devoid of what we would understand as a soul or natural spirituality. They do not have empathic feelings. They don't experience feelings of sympathy or empathy as a natural human being does. And they sense that in us, and they sense their great lack. I think that I know that natural human beings have access through hyperdimensional DNA, for one thing, to superconscious realms of reality and awareness that are fundamentally divine, that are directly tied in to the creative cosmic levels of reality in the universe. My perception is that these beings, these hollow creatures, many of whom we refer to as the powers that be, and remember, when Cliff High in particular speaks of the powers that be, these entities, whoever or whatever they are not individuals who appear in the mainstream news media. They would not be people like the director of the World Bank or the United States Federal Reserve Bank or the President of the United States or the Queen or King of any given country. The powers that be are one or more levels above. So we actually, for the most part, don't know who these people are, if we can call them people, where they live, or anything about the circumstances of their everyday or day-to-day existence. We have to guess at their value system, but we can see that their value system is vastly different than that of a human being with a soul who has a caring, empathic, sympathetic, compassionate nature. So I believe that's why they fear us, because we have what they don't have, and they can never get, even if in theory they are human and they share DNA that is like ours. Behaving as they are is a guaranteed recipe, in my view, to kill any soul they might have had at the outset. In my view, none of us create our souls, in that we didn't actually make it ourselves from scratch, so to speak. We were given a soul, a quantum of spiritual force or superconscious spiritual awareness, if you will. We were given that by the universe. It's an unspeakably precious gift. It is ours to create, to nurture, to seek to know, to understand, to integrate with, to grow with through eternity. That said, I do believe if you willfully set out to thwart the superconscious creative impulse of the cosmos, and you set out to thwart that, and worse, to try to destroy it and impede it with every hand, I believe in the process of doing that, it is possible to essentially nullify or annihilate your soul to the point where the cosmos says, okay, you don't want this thing, we'll take it back.
Thank you, Richard. We have heard a lot about the elite's depopulation plan.
Yes.
How does that fit into the preparing for, say, an Earth cataclysm? Are the elite truly planning for the depopulation of 90% of humans by their hands, or are they hinting that, through the Georgia Guidestones, that there will be a mass extinction event and they are not, in fact, going to depopulate the planet, but they are preparing for it, or both?
I think maybe there's an element of both. I am not sure that the so-called powers that be actually intend themselves to kill 90% of the population. I believe if they intended to do that, they would have already done it, because the technology has existed for at least half a century to do that, if they wanted to. So I'm a little skeptical of the most rabid proponents of that idea. However, I do think that what we're coming up on is a period of such chaos and turmoil on this planet that it's quite possible, and maybe even very likely, that a great many people are going to die in the coming years from a wide variety of causes. From warfare, from famine, from plague, from volcanoes, from earthquakes, from drought, from hurricanes, from tornadoes, from you name it, from all kinds of different causes, tsunamis, and on and on. Because, and I accept the many people who are saying that there are going to be more and more, I accept the view of the growing number of people who are pointing to the increasing number and severity of natural disasters and catastrophes on this planet, and the idea that not only are there more of them, but they're increasing in scope and intensity, and are likely to do so for at least the next few years, and for all we know, the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years. We will find out. But my sense is that a lot of people are going to be dying in the coming years, in very large numbers. And in fact, my dreams have suggested this to me. At the age of 3, I was visited by an entity whom I called the Bone Lady, who gave me to know, even at that young age, that this time of great trouble, darkness, and turmoil was coming. So my whole life, I always had a sense of foreboding that this time was going to come. Now it's here, I can hardly believe that it has come. I always sensed that it was coming because of what the Bone Lady communicated to me more than 50 years ago. But at the same time, I sort of thought maybe it won't. Now indeed it appears that yes, but after all it will, and it is arriving. It has started arriving already. So it looks like the near term is going to be pretty bleak. There's an element of karma involved in who survives physically and who doesn't. There's an element of luck. There's an element of preparation. If you're standing on a railroad track and you see a huge freight train bearing down on you at 60 miles per hour, do you stand there on the railroad track and mutter to yourself, "Que sera, sera, whatever will be," and wait to be plastered by the locomotive? Or do you very carefully step off of the railroad track in time and watch the freight train thunder past and live to see another day? You see, there are some people who say, "Oh well, there's going to be a lot of people dying, and I guess I will too." There are other people who say, "Well, wait a minute, hard times are coming. Why don't I make some preparations and maximize my chances of surviving and possibly even flourishing while all around me other people are losing their heads, maybe literally, because they did nothing to prepare or to help themselves." There's an old saying, God helps those who help themselves.
Yes, there is. Richard, and one of the many causes is manifesting as we speak. A preliminary report from leading scientists for the International Program on the State of the Ocean, IPSO, recently warned of a mass extinction from the current rate of marine distress. Cliff sees the possibility of linguistics showing 68% of the world's oceans dying due to various factors. With the elite's underground bases and doomsday seed vaults, and with your recent article on your blog titled "The Final Meter Measures .999, do you think it's pretty much too late to turn this around? Are we at the stage where the ecology of the Earth is going to crash and it's no longer a case of trying to fix the issues, but to shun the powers that were and prepare and save family, loved ones, and whoever you can?
Yeah. Yes, it's already very late. It's so late that it's not a question of whether the ecology is going to crash. The ecology is already crashing, and it is crashing very hard. We are already well into a major extinction event, species extinction event on this planet. So our agenda now, our task now will have to be on a global basis as a race, as a human species, to save what we can of what remains. That said, we're also going to have to do a tremendous amount of ecological remediation going forward from here. So yes, my answer is in the short term, yes, there is a huge ecological crash, and it's already underway. Many life forms are dying already and in large numbers. The human species is not necessarily immune to that because we are also part of the ecological chain on this planet. So your task then becomes, if you're concerned about yourself and your family, to make sure that you and your loved ones are not part of the extinction event. So in the short term, you will probably have to be preoccupied with your personal and family survival and well-being, because we're going to go through some really hard times much of which, not all of which, but much of which we have unnecessarily and unthinkingly brought upon ourselves and on many of the other life forms that share this planet with us.
Okay, thank you, Richard. We're speaking with Richard Sauder. Please support him by purchasing his great books from eventhorizon.chronicle.blogspot.com. Once again, that's eventhorizon.chronicle.blogspot.com. What we'll do now is we'll move into the category of underground bases, and our next set of questions is from Jay Durand.
Richard, in many previous interviews, including the Veritas Show and Coast to Coast, you concluded that the underground bases from your research could have been built for a number of reasons. Are you familiar with the work of Maurice Cottrell and Patrick Gerrel on an 11,500-year solar mega sunspot cycle? Has your research shown the possible cause of the elite's rush to build underground bases be due to their fear of a series of massive solar flares and CMEs hitting the Earth?
Yeah, I do think that in the case of at least some of these facilities, that could be a reason. My research indicates that the so-called ruling elites and the so-called powers that be are aware at their innermost, highest levels of the reality of periodic cataclysm on this planet and in the solar system, and so at least part of what they have built is for eventualities like that. But it's important to understand that many of these underground bases and also undersea bases are multi-purpose. Some of the purposes are publicly known and well discussed, and have been well discussed over the years by me and others, of course, too. Some of them are so secretive that I don't think that we can even guess or speculate very intelligently about what's going on inside them. I suspect that probably there are events going on that are so bizarre that we don't even have the vocabulary and mental framework to talk about or think about what is happening in them, because it's so far divorced from our everyday lives in reality. Now, I would speculate that based on the anecdotal evidence that's available, there do seem to be joint terrestrial and extraterrestrial facilities, both underground and undersea, and also bizarre science fiction-like genetic engineering and cloning projects and programs that are going on underground. And beyond that, we're really getting into strange territory. I would speculate further that probably there are some hyperdimensional or transdimensional or interdimensional aspects to some of these undersea and underground facilities as well. Beyond that, I mean, we're so deep into speculation and at the deepest levels, and I mean that both figuratively and literally, at the deepest levels, the secrecy and security around these underground and undersea bases is so compartmentalized that it's very, very difficult to know what's going on unless you are part of those hermetically sealed, compartmentalized programs. And if you are, then you absolutely cannot and do not talk about them. So I'm doing the best I can, looking from the outside in with my nose pressed up against Alice's looking glass.
What is a follow-up question? What is your interpretation of the Fukushima incident? How bad is it? Also, there is a developing nuclear crisis with the nuclear plant in Missouri, which is close to flooding. What is your take on Fukushima and in general with Cliff High linking radiation fallout to his dire ill winds forecast? And with the Northern Hemisphere containing the majority of nuclear power plants, how concerned are you with global nuclear meltdowns, and was this one of your reasons for moving to Ecuador?
Well, I'll start first. No, with Ecuador, it wasn't one of my reasons for moving to Ecuador, but I have to say that I'm glad I'm here now because, yes, the situation at Fukushima is dire. And let me say that in uppercase letters, it is dire in all capital letters, and it will not be going away anytime soon. Yes, I do think that these problems with the nuclear power plants will be ongoing, not only in Japan, but the danger of a Fukushima-style nuclear disaster with the nuclear power plants in Nebraska along the flooding Missouri River is very real. I do not rule out whatsoever that a similar scenario could play out in North America, and even conceivably far worse than what we see in Japan, because there are many more nuclear reactors in North America than in Japan, and there are a good many very old nuclear reactors in poor repair that are very susceptible to catastrophic failure if their emergency systems and backup systems do not function as they're designed to, for whatever reason. And so I agree, or I am inclined to think, rather, that there could well be merit in Cliff High's talking about the ill winds and connecting them to this ongoing radioactive catastrophe in Japan, and the possibility that the same thing could happen in the United States most any day. I mean, maybe even later tonight, for all that we know. So I'm very concerned. How concerned am I? Very. I intend to remain in South America. I do believe the Southern Hemisphere will be safer. You mentioned that there are far fewer nuclear reactors in the Southern Hemisphere. That's true. Something like 95% of them are in the Northern Hemisphere, and also the vast majority of nuclear weapons are in the Northern Hemisphere. So in the event of an all-out nuclear war, or even limited nuclear war, all else being equal, it is likely that most of that war would be waged in the Northern Hemisphere, and the same goes for nuclear reactors. Since there are far fewer nuclear reactors in the Southern Hemisphere, as nuclear reactors begin to catastrophically fail, and my perception is that there may be more nuclear reactor failures in the coming days, weeks, and months in the Northern Hemisphere, then the lion's share, the preponderance of the nuclear fallout from that will be in the Northern Hemisphere. So I'm very concerned. Now, I have to say that I came to South America on a vision quest. I consider that it is ongoing to this day. I continue to get new insights, to have new revealing dreams, continue to partake of ayahuasca in ayahuasca ceremonies from time to time. One of the first things that I noticed when I came was, after I'd been here about a couple of weeks and had drunk ayahuasca a time or two, the first shaman with whom I did ayahuasca ceremonies came to me in a vivid dream and very solemnly told me that a number of cities were going to be destroyed by atomic explosions. That's where he put it. And that this was imminent. Now, at that time, I assumed he meant nuclear war. But now I'm starting to see it doesn't need to be that way. You can have nuclear reactors blow up, and those constitute atomic explosions. And those are also capable of destroying not only cities, but laying waste entire countries and whole continents and regions of the world with deadly radioactive fallout that will linger for hundreds of thousands of years.
Another follow-up question. Could another possibility for the underground bases be due to atmospheric poisoning through volcanic eruptions? A recent documentary on Yellowstone and megavolcanoes in general, Yellowstone apparently killed plant life in Nebraska over 700 miles away due to Marie's disease or lung collapse due to dust inhalation. Cliff's WebBots sees media reporting people covering their faces in the future almost like a fad. With volcanoes increasing in activity across the globe, it seems clear that a combination of factors will cause the surface of the planet to be barely inhabitable for a period of time, and that underground bases may be necessary to survive. How concerned are you about the air being polluted? Are you planning on looking for a cave or underground shelter in Ecuador as part of your survival strategy?
Well, of course, I am as concerned about the breathability of the air and atmosphere as anyone else, because I breathe air myself, and I do it every day on a constant basis, day in, day out. So I am concerned about that. It does seem that more and more volcanoes are popping off. I know that there are people who have had visions of massive simultaneous volcanic activity when they just saw scores and scores and scores of volcanoes popping off simultaneously all around the world. So yes, in that situation, breathing the air would be a big issue. Also, photosynthesis would be a big issue if the atmosphere becomes too overcast and cloudy and dark, and plants don't get enough sunlight to carry out photosynthesis, then agricultural plants would not produce crops. And if agriculture fails, of course, then there's not nearly as much food to eat. And if there's less food, then that causes a potential famine or starvation issue. So there are many different facets to a heightened level of volcanic activity, breathable air only being one of them. I don't really have a spider hole in Ecuador, so to speak, or a bunker or a cave or cavern where I can go and hang out for X number of days or weeks or months. While the atmosphere clears up, I'm going to be like, 90% of everyone else. I'm going to do the best I can, probably with a bandana over my nose and over my face and goggles over my eyes. And I think most of us in these coming times will just do the best we can. If we're fortunate, the best that we can do will be good enough. Sadly, in some cases, it won't be good enough. And you know what? At the end when you reach the end of your rope and you've done everything you can and you're overcome by volcanic ash or whatever, the reality is that a lot of people are probably going to die.
Richard, Robert Felix believes that we are headed for a magnetic pole reversal and a new ice age. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think it's very possible, and I want to add a little bit more before I go into that on my last response, and that is to say that as with pole shift, so also with the volcanism, flexibility in our thinking and our behavior. And by behavior, I mean what we do, what we concretely, physically do with our bodies, with our lives, with our cooperation with other people, is going to be invaluable and imperative for our survival. Flexibility in thinking and in action will be invaluable and imperative. Nowhere more so than in the case of a possible physical pole shift or some kind of pole reversal or magnetic field flip-flop of polarity or some kind of physical reversal of rotation, something like that, or some combination of one or more of those. I do believe that things like that are possible. I do know that at the highest levels of the underground base planning and preparation, there are people involved in the planning, construction, design, etc. of those facilities who are aware that these kinds of things can happen to the Earth, and the geological records suggest have happened in the past. having said that, I myself had a very vivid dream about 3 years ago, and I've learned to pay attention to my dreams because sometimes they reflect accurately, sometimes uncannily accurately, what happens in coming times. Not always, mind you, but sometimes, from time to time, one of my dreams will be precognitive or prescient to a degree. And in this dream, I was on the earth where it experienced a sort of physical pole shift, or maybe it was more a change of direction of rotation. From my perspective, within the context of the dream, it seemed to take about 18 hours. First of all, noticed that the sun had stopped moving across the sky. It stood still at the same point in the sky for hours, for several hours. And then the planet started to rotate in the opposite direction. Now, I was with a couple of good-looking women, a couple of really good-looking blonde women. And I don't know what relationship I had with them, but they were very savvy. I asked them, what's going on? Now, why did the sun stop moving across the sky? I've never seen anything like that. And they said, oh, the Earth is just flipping its axis. Well, at that point, I became extremely concerned. But they were absolutely nonplussed by it all, and I was actually staying with them in a type of huge, for want of better words, it was like a huge glass wigwam, or like a huge glass greenhouse almost. And I was living in there with them. And so, not long after they told me that, and I'd become extremely anxious, I noticed that it began to rain, but it was no ordinary rain. The raindrops were the size of Olympic swimming pools. Think of all the water in an Olympic swimming pool, Olympic-sized swimming pool. Each individual raindrop was like that. In other words, sheets of water with individual raindrops the size of containing as much water as a large swimming pool just came falling torrentially from the sky. So instead of getting an inch of rain in an hour, there were maybe like 100 feet of rain in 5 minutes. Just mind-boggling. And I was thinking as this was happening, no one can survive this. And in fact, if something like that does happen, I would dare say 99.9% of the population would perish.
Well, thank you for your answers.
Yes, thanks. If the world's going to end, I think I could think of worse companies to spend it with instead of two blondes, but I'll pass it on to Vito now.
Yes, Richard, this is Vito. And tell me, have you learned anything about the massive U.S. underground base at Pine Gap, Australia, since the writing of Hidden in Plain Sight? And if you have, can you please let us know what you've learned?
No, I haven't. All of my information about Pine Gap came my way before the writing of the book. But for those who haven't read the book, of course, I would say, buy my book and read it, please. You learn far more than I could possibly tell you in an hour or two interview. But beyond that, it is a very large facility, very deep, and so secretive that almost no one knows what goes on in there, including the Australian government. And I believe that there have even been Australian prime ministers who have tried to find out what's happening at Pine Gap with very mixed results, with limited success. Speculate. I mean, let your imagination run, let your mind run, and you may be, in your wildest science fiction-like musings, you may be close to what's happening deep underground beneath the middle of the Australian outback, because the Americans, by the Americans I mean the NSA, the CIA, the various Pentagon agencies, are saying next to nothing about what they do down in that place.
Yes, and I would recommend to all listening to buy the book. It's an extremely informative book. Well, very good. Well, I'm going to pass the ball now over to Patrick.
Dr. Sauder, you mentioned that the Federal Center in Denver might be more important than the Denver airport. Do you think it was expanded around the time the airport was built? I heard that the facility wasn't that elaborate, at least in the 1980s.
Well, I think that many of the underground bases have been expanded, updated, made more sophisticated, enlarged in recent years. The program of underground construction is ongoing. Now, I think that both the Denver Federal Center and also whatever is beneath the Denver airport are tied into the network of underground facilities and tunnels beneath the Colorado Rockies. My research and what I've been told suggests to me that Colorado underground beneath the Rockies is a focus of activity for the planners in the military-industrial complex in the United States and perhaps internationally even. There's a lot there. For decades, they've been planning for that. What I have intuited and also been told, there are tunnels beneath the Front Range of the Rockies as well as elsewhere in Colorado, and facilities up and down the Front Range. This would be to the west of Denver, extending north and south. And one of my informants actually worked beneath the large NORAD facility, a former NORAD facility in Colorado. This is the Cheyenne Mountain facility. It's well known. And actually, what we see on television and in movies is just a small part of what's there. There's a cavernous, deeper facility beneath that, and it is a cutting-edge, science fiction-like industrial facility. There are multiple such facilities in the continental United States, and I presume elsewhere around the world, with thousands of people work in them. They have the most advanced engineering available on the planet. These bases are constantly provisioned, stocked, supplied, ready to go. Essentially, this category or class of facility is designed to restart industrial late 20th century, early 21st century civilization and build it from scratch, from the ground up, if need be. And they have all the necessary scientific, engineering, and industrial know-how, equipment, technology, expertise, and personnel in these facilities to do that. They are large, they are deep, they are massive, they are sophisticated, they are like something out of a science fiction movie, and there are multiple such facilities. And that's just one example of one class of the major underground facilities that you would find around the country, and I presume around the world.
I have no doubt that Colorado's instrumental. Didn't Obama sign one of the first important bills out in Colorado?
I don't recall, but whether he did or not, that region, the Rocky Mountain region in general, is important. I don't know if it'll do them any good, because what's coming in terms of the natural earth changes, my sense from my visions, my dreams, and even reading the Science of the Times, reading the headlines and carefully sifting the wheat from the chaff and information flow on the internet, it's clear to me that big trouble lies just ahead. And whether or not the powers that be and their various minions will fare nearly so well as they hope they will or believe they may in the coming time of turmoil very much remains to be seen. I suspect, for a wide variety of reasons, not least of which would be karmic, that they may be in for a very, very rough time, both individually and collectively.
I find it interesting that Dick Cheney was rumored to have been building underneath his house. I guess there were explosions or rumors of explosions. Now, does it make sense that he would want his own shelter rather than waving his golden ticket to join the rest of the Klan?
Yeah, well, you see, Dick Cheney is an insider's insider. He's not currently, doesn't currently hold any open official political position in the American system of governance. Joseph Biden, the former senator from Delaware, is vice president at present. But you're right, when Dick Cheney was vice president, there was a lot of very heavy construction activity that went on and on for weeks and months at the vice presidential mansion, which is on the grounds of the United States Naval Observatory in the northwest sector of Washington, D.C. I cover that in some detail in my book, Hidden in Plain Sight, Beyond the X-Files. At the same period of time, there was some other very peculiar construction activity that the Navy carried out. Both of these were Navy, United States Navy construction projects, and the Navy carried out another very highly secret construction project right on the shores of the Potomac River, not too far from, I believe it was pretty close to the Jefferson Memorial. And my best guess is that this was related, both of these construction projects were related to the deep underground labyrinth of tunnels and facilities that underlies official Washington, D.C. And in Cheney's case, I don't doubt whatsoever that he was having a high-speed deep underground elevator constructed so that he would not have to motorcade over to the White House to take a high-speed elevator to the deep underground tunnel network beneath Washington, D.C. I'm pretty sure if there was not already a high-speed elevator from the vice presidential mansion, that they were either installing one for the first time or greatly upgrading an already existing elevator and making it faster and better.
Thank you. You've alluded to dark, strange beings. Do you think there might be humanoid beings walking among us, or are you leaning toward interdimensional beings exerting control over the human population? Perhaps it's both.
Yeah, I think it's likely to be both. There's plenty of anecdotal evidence that these so-called Nordic extraterrestrials who look like Northern European types. They're tall, well-proportioned, fair-haired for the majority of them. In other words, they'd fit right in Norway or Sweden or Germany or Poland or Great Britain, someplace like that, Belgium, Holland. They're good-looking, they're tall, and they have a technology that rings around the technology that we have, at least in our everyday lives here in the world that we know, most of us. So I think they're here, and I think that those Nordic, Northern European types have been here for a long time. I think there are others as well, some of which disguise themselves perhaps using cloaking technology, which could be mental technology or non-mental technology, other types of physical technology, perhaps electronic technology that they use to conceal themselves as they walk amongst us. And as for our dark beings, so-called fallen spiritual entities who seek to subvert humanity to their will or feed off of in a vampiric kind of way, yeah, I think there's plenty of evidence for the existence of that type of entity as well. The important thing for the aware human being is to be as conscious as possible so that you are alert to other beings and entities around you, both benevolent and malevolent. You want to avoid the malevolent ones, of course, and to cooperate with and interact with the benevolent ones as much as possible.
Thank you. Also on Coast to Coast, you mentioned that humans have what amounts to magical powers of consciousness, that the organization or puppet masters are afraid of us. Can you explain what makes humans divine and give examples along with practical ways of developing these powers?
Yeah, I think what makes us divine, when you get right down to it, is our DNA. We have kind of a God antenna inside of us that is constantly both receiving divine energy and transmitting it by the aegis of the DNA, under the aegis of the DNA. I think the DNA is like a divine hyperdimensional molecule that's been put inside of us that connects us to our soul, and our soul essentially is a divine spark, a chip off of the block, creative block, if you will. That's the creative impulse, the cosmic impulse behind the totality of the universe. And so we have that. It's hardwired into us through our DNA. And at the physical level, which is another way of saying we're not so physical as all that if we have DNA in us. But the DNA kind of plugs us into a soul, and maybe it's the other way around. The soul plugs into the physical realm through the DNA and activates our physical bodies through the DNA, hand-in-glove fashion. So we do have, because of this hyperdimensional aspect of our being, from the inside out, a sort of magical capability. Now, hollow beings don't have this. They have to fake it or steal it or take it from someone else or mooch off of another being who does have it, thereby lowering the vital life force of that being and artificially enhancing their own or juicing themselves up, so to speak, at the expense of the other more natural, God-infused entity, if you will. And that's what a natural human being is, God-infused. So they fear that. These hollow beings fear the Creator. They want to flee from their Creator. They, for whatever reason, have turned against that divine impulse and want to quash it, want to thwart it, want to work against it. For the life of me, I don't understand this, but this is part and parcel of the machine's agenda. It is bound and determined to, in my view, kill biological life, because biological life has DNA in it, and DNA is a hyper-dimensional molecule. It's like the hotline, the God hotline, if you will. It plugs us in to the very highest levels of hyperdimensional reality in the universe, right up to the God levels. And I don't know, that's why we're divine. I don't know why they fear it. So to my way of thinking, they should seek ways in which they themselves could plug in, but maybe they're so far fallen that possibility is no longer available to them. So then that's truly sad, and their fate is not going to be a happy one, because at the end, my understanding is whatever quantum of cosmic life energy remains in them will be taken back to the creative source, conscious, hyperconscious creative source of the universe, which you can call God or whatever you want, the Creator. But their rejection by this point may be so total that there's no hope for them, and that's why they try to suck off of us, so to speak. Now, how do you develop your God connection, so to speak. Telling the truth is one extremely important way to do that. I think it was Jesus who observed that you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. So being truthful is real important. Real important. Let me repeat. Telling the truth is real important. These hollow beings do not know the truth. The truth is not in them. We see that they lie all the time. In fact, they even lie when the truth would serve their purpose better. They are so devoted to the lie that they will even lie when the truth would advance their cause. That's how fallen they are. I don't pretend to understand it. I'm only describing what I see. They are sad, sad creatures. Now, another way that you can improve your God connection is by asking. Ask the Creator. Dear Creator, improve my connection with you. I want to improve my connection with you. I thank you for creating me. I thank you for giving me a mind and a soul and a life. Help me. Help me to know what to do, what to think, how to live. I mean, here again, you're talking about Jesus who says, ask and it shall be given to you. So you were created with a mouth. My understanding is the universe is holographic, at least in part, and for all I know, totally so. So that being true, you can pretty well just talk out loud, and the universe will listen to you. The very atoms in the wall of your room will listen to you. So you could address the atoms and say, look, I want to communicate with the highest divine level that I'm capable of communicating in my present state of being, and here's what I want to communicate. Gratitude. Thanks for being created. How many people say thank you to the Creator, to the universe, for creating them? Astonishingly, comparatively few people do.
Now, by them, the hollow ones feeding off of us, sounds like they need us in some fashion. Dr. Joseph Farrell and Richard Hoagland, also Richard Dolan, often speak about a breakaway civilization or a parallel civilization. And perhaps they'll have to take a good number with us to continue to feed. Does any of your research tie into this?
Yeah, I agree. I do think that there is a parallel civilization, one or more, by the way. I think that we even could have a relict, R-E-L-I-C-T, a parallel or breakaway civilization going back to the time of Atlantis and further. And that would include elements from the time of ancient Egypt from 10,000 years ago, and then going back before that to the time of Atlantis, and also to the preceding Vedic civilization in India from 10 or 15, 20,000 years ago. All of that and more, I think, probably do have relict remnants in existence on this planet, under this planet, and quite possibly also on the moon and on Mars and perhaps elsewhere in the solar system, and conceivably even in nearby solar systems. Now, I do consider that the present, say, beginning maybe even as long ago as the period of the American Civil War in the early to mid 1860s, I believe starting then there was probably enough of a scientific, engineering, and industrial base in terms of its sophistication, and also a machine tool capability to begin to make technology with a high enough degree of precision that enterprising minds and engineers and scientists, I believe, could already, 150 years ago, have begun to make tremendous breakthroughs in compartmentalized programs that would have permitted already in the last half of the 19th century technological, scientific, and engineering breakthroughs such as this so-called breakaway or parallel civilization actually predate the World War II period and post-World War II period. Though, having said that, it's clear that during the Nazi era and after, continuing right down to the present day, that this breakaway or parallel technical faction that's highly compartmentalized, extremely secretive and very well financed, has made tremendous strides and advances that have been kept back. 99% of it has been kept back from us. We don't see it in our everyday society, but it is being used in secret, and my research strongly indicates that.
Thank you, Richard. We're now moving into the Cataclysms, Aliens, Advanced Technology, and Breakaway Civilizations portion of questioning.
The next set of questions comes from Vito.
Yes, Richard, at this point, I just wanted to thank you for all your dedicated hard work and the peaceful and liberty-minded intentions that you hold for the average man and woman on planet Earth in light of all the personal dangers that you have probably faced in doing so. And I also want to thank you for the very personal touch of signing all the books that you sell, or at least the ones that I bought from you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And my question is for you next is, in light of the orchestrated 9/11 event, the Patriot Act, and the many other losses of our freedoms, along with the apparent secret underground and ocean society with extraterrestrials, how do you see a peaceful way to overcome the prison planet that the powers that be or were have planned for us?
Well, we already have a prison planet. Let me say that at the outset. I first heard this term in about the year, 1985 or 86, and so that's like a quarter of a century ago. But within 2 seconds, I understood the truth of it. We are on a prison planet. We have been for a long time, at least for thousands of years, if not tens, maybe even hundreds of thousands of years, maybe even millions of years. But we are on a prison planet. This planet is quarantined for some reason. We, as a human race, apparently are under a collective state of amnesia. We don't remember our own history. We don't have any knowledge as a global civilization. The average man and woman in the street only has the haziest, foggiest concept of what happened 5, 10, 20, 30,000 years ago, if anything. I mean, before the time of the Roman Empire, we know there was ancient Egypt, and before that, it's all just a big fog, a big haze. So we as a race have clearly been here on this planet a long time, and we don't have the faintest clue what happened to us 20, 30, 50, 60, 80, 100,000, 200,000 years ago. So we are absolutely confused and forgetful. We're like, it's like a mental asylum. It's as if we are in a huge mental asylum, a global prison planet. The only way I see out of this for us is a lot of us, as many of us as possible, have to open up our higher spiritual centers. This would mean our heart chakra, our third eye chakra, and the crown chakra. For those who aren't familiar with chakras and Kundalini-based mysticism and spirituality and yoga, Google these terms: chakra, C-H-A-K-R-A. Google Kundalini. Google third eye. These types of terms, crown chakra. Because when you open these higher chakras through meditation or through some type of yoga, through some type of chanting of the divine names of God, activities like this, you gain conscious access to hyper conscious states of awareness, to super conscious states of knowing that the average person ordinarily doesn't tap into. We, as a race, have been systematically dumbed down for thousands and thousands of years. I perceive the activity of the machine and all of its helpers in this very active program of dumbing down of humanity to where we have been so flummoxed, fooled, and confused that we don't know anymore who we are or where we've come from. And it's been observed many times by a variety of thinkers that you can't know where you're going if you don't know where you've come from. So you first have to understand something about yourself. You can only understand where you are now by comprehending what happened in the past. And only in understanding what happened in the past and grokking how that shaped your circumstances and your situation in the present can you intelligently formulate a plan for how you're going to handle things in the future, how you're going to configure the circumstances of your life and your society now, so that the future will be different both from the present and even more so from the past. So we must have higher consciousness. There are some ways to get that, as I said, through various types of yoga, and there are different yoga systems. People are most familiar, I think, with Hatha yoga, but there's also japa yoga, which is chanting of the names of God and establishing through the name of God, whatever name you choose, Allah, Jesus, Buddha, Yahweh, Krishna. I mean, there are many names you could choose, and to tap into the divine levels of reality, and then your mind will begin to resonate with a higher level of understanding, and you will see more clearly and think more clearly. Or there are many websites now offering a variety of CDs and MP3s that you can download from the internet in many cases for $9.95. This is American dollars, or $19.95 or $29.95. In other words, the prices are not very exorbitant. These are meditation CDs, helpful for opening the heart chakra, the third eye chakra, or the crown chakra, for helping people to obtain the ability or develop the ability to go consciously out of the body, or to have the conscious lucid dreaming state of awareness. And all of this is helpful for raising consciousness, for expanding consciousness, for increasing the level of understanding of elevated levels of awareness. So you look for these websites, they'll oftentimes use keyword terms like brain sync, sync, S-Y-N-C, or mind sync, M-I-N-D-S-Y-N-C, or holosync, H-O-L-O-S-Y-N-C, or there are others like binaural, B-I-N-A-U-R-A-L. The binaural technology has been widely used for decades now, where you put on headphones and a different frequency of sound is fed into each ear. So the right ear might get, say, an audio tone of 104 cycles. The left ear might get an audio tone of 101 cycles. The brain splits the difference and makes a cycle of 3 cycles, which is in delta brainwave state. And so as you listen to this, you move into a very deep meditative state. Your brain naturally is entrained in this way by this audio input through your auditory cortex. So all of this is available if people want to use it. Any of these methods can be effective. The question is, do people want to use them? And my perspective is, a lot of us had better start doing these things seriously every day, because we need to raise our game now.
Well put. I concur. On the note of the people who aren't meditating daily, do you perceive any connections with HAARP, the Fukushima earthquake, the BP oil spill, the New Orleans hurricane and flooding, global weather changes, and all the New World Order prison planet type things? Do you think all or some of those may be put upon us by the prison planet tyrants?
Oh, yeah, some of them definitely are. The nuclear technology, for example, is dastardly. It is nasty, wicked, evil stuff. Little more need be said. Just look at what's happening in Fukushima. We cannot handle nuclear technology. It is beyond our means. It is deadly. It is lethal for our geological age. Once you uncork the nuclear genie, the bottle, the nuclear genie comes out. It's like opening the lid to Pandora's box, and all of these evil beings, these lethally radioactive particles come sleeting out by the millions and trillions. How do you fix that? I mean, once you set it loose, how do you fix it? And the answer is, it's almost impossible. So the only way to fix it is not to create the situation in the first place so that the problem arises. Unfortunately, we now have hundreds of these nuclear power reactors on this planet. So we have called the tune, and it appears that we are now going to pay the radioactive piper, and it will be, the price is going to be a hard one. That's all I can say. And a lot of people are going to be weeping radioactive tears, and what they burn. What can I tell you? Radioactive tears burn.
Well, hopefully we can do something about that. Tell me.
We haven't yet. So I'm past the hope stage. You see, and this is the point I'm making. This is a time that separates the women from the girls, the men from the boys. It's no good to hope. What are you going to concretely do? You can sit in your chair and hope that money falls out of the sky into your hand. You can sit in a chair and hope that the nuclear reactors in Japan will magically stop melting down. Won't happen. Concrete actions are necessary, and at the very least, what needs to happen right now is every single nuclear reactor on this planet needs to be shut down because they are all prone to catastrophic failure. We've already had 4 that have failed catastrophically. So 1% in the last quarter century of the nuclear reactors on this planet have failed catastrophically. The one in Ukraine failed, and we have these 3 in Japan. We have 2 in the United States and Nebraska that are surrounded by rising floodwaters, and they could possibly imminently fail as well in the coming days and weeks. Nothing would surprise me less. So we have to shut them all down. What we need now is concrete action. However, the powers that be aren't doing that, so they need to be persuaded as to the wisdom of doing that by the adults, by the people with souls and with hearts. This is a time when women and men need to do things and say things pursuant to making sure that these nuclear reactors will shut down now, because if they're not shut down, there are going to be more and more meltdowns until the northern hemisphere of this planet at least will be so irradiated that you won't want to live there and possibly will not be able to live there. So we don't have the luxury anymore of hoping. It's too late for that. We can see what's already happening. Now it's time for action.
Very good. Action we shall make then. Tell me, you have written about Operation Paperclip and Nazi connections with our industrial military complex. Do you think, like Jim Mars may, that we have human off-planet colonies or civilizations that may or may not be Nazi-founded?
Yes, I do. I think the Nazis did make some very interesting, fundamental, technological, engineering, scientific breakthroughs back in the 30s and 40s. I think that Project Paperclip did snatch up just as much of that as they possibly could, including as many scientists, Nazi scientists, mathematicians, engineers, and technicians as possible, and made further breakthroughs in the post-World War II period, some of them quite spectacular. And so, yes, I think it's more than possible. I would say it's likely that there are facilities on the Moon and on Mars that have Nazi input. I would also include Antarctic region in that. I've researched the Antarctic enough to know that there is a real veil of secrecy that's been drawn over a great deal of what happens down there and has been for more than half a century. So I think that that's also an area of high interest. There are various secretive activities going on that have been going on for a very long time. And by the way, there was Nazi interest as well in Antarctic back in the 30s and 40s, including in the World War II period. So, yes, I essentially think there is merit to what Jim Marrs has said.
Okay. Well, tell me, what do you think is the true origin of mankind? And when I say that, what I mean is, do you think we are originally of this planet? And I know that you made mention that we do have special DNA, as in God-given or divine-given, but do you think it perhaps has been post-manipulated by aliens? And do you think we may come from a different planet or galaxy?
Yeah, I will. There are several levels to my answer. Number one, my perception, both from my intuition and little bits and pieces of information I've gotten from diverse sources and individuals over a period really of decades, is that human template, so to speak, is hardwired into the foundational matrix of this galaxy, such that when conditions arise on any planet in any solar system in this galaxy that are favorable to the human life form, that the biological process on that planet is predisposed after a given number of a certain amount of time to create human beings through the natural course of development and evolution of biological life on that planet. In other words, I think the human form is part and parcel of the fabric of this galaxy, and this galaxy naturally births human populations on planets that are congenial for biological life. So my presumption is that there may be scores, for all I know, thousands of planets with resident human populations in this galaxy, and that because that's the case, notwithstanding that the humans come from different planets and will be somewhat different, each population will be somewhat different because living conditions will necessarily vary from planet to planet. Nonetheless, that there is a substantial degree of compatibility between, in the genetic codes, between different planetary populations of humans. That's the first level of my answer, which I can't prove to you, but that's a working hypothesis for me. The second level of my answer is that years ago, I knew a man who was a high-level advisor for an unnamed organization or agency working in the Pentagon. I don't know who he worked for, but he was an advisor to flag officer personnel in the Pentagon, generals, admirals, and advised them on a variety of issues. He had encyclopedic knowledge about a number of different areas. I don't know how he got his information, but he had it. And one of the things that he told me is that essentially most human lineages or groupings on this planet are not native to this planet. The most recent arrivals, according to him, were the so-called Orientals, whom we would know as the East Asians, the Vietnamese, Koreans, Japanese, Laotians, Cambodians, Chinese, etc. They're the most recent arrivals, but they're not from here. The Caucasians are not from here either. Evidently, other groups aren't from here either. I'm not sure that so-called black Africans are either from the Earth. It does appear there are or were some native species of humans or humanoids to the Earth. The Cro-Magnons probably were. The Neanderthals were others. There may be relic populations of these groups on the Earth, but the numbers would be very small, and they would live in out-of-the-way, very rural, forested or mountainous, thinly populated areas, thinly populated by terrestrial Homo sapiens. So that would be the second level of my answer. It does appear that by accident or design, a lot of the human genetic lineages that are on the planet now, or at least their descendants, didn't come originally from this planet. Either crash landed here, found their way here and colonized and or settled, or were exiled here as prison populations from other parts of the galaxy, etc. But that obviously, over the many thousands of years, there's been quite a bit of interbreeding, and there's been a lot of homogenization between these different groups wherever they may have originated. So that's the way I see it. I don't know. And what was the last part of your question? I'm sorry, or maybe it was the first part.
Well, I think you've done a good job at answering it. But it basically was, do you think our DNA has been manipulated by aliens?
Yes, the manipulation question. I think, yes, there's been manipulation by extraterrestrial factions, both human and non-human. And also, I believe that in the times of the distant past, 10, 20,000 years ago, that there was genetic manipulation of human DNA by other terrestrial humans in order to create a lower worker caste, if you will, that would be used as slave labor, as menial servants, if you will, that type of thing. So yes, I do think there's been a lot of manipulation of the human genome, of the resident terrestrial population on this planet in our time. And to enslave us, basically, to keep us dumb, stupid, barefoot, and pregnant. With great success. We've bred prolifically. We're pretty dumb and we're pretty stupid.
Okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Vito. The next question I have, Richard, is that Cliff sees some sort of alien war or alien contention from his webbots in our short-term future. Do you think we could still see a Carol Rosen, Werner von Braun Project Bluebeam style false flag? If so, Richard Dolan recently said that it would be logistically difficult. So what form do you think the fake alien invasion will be?
I think we're already under the Project Bluebeam scenario and have been for thousands of years. I think that's the whole agenda of the machine. It's drawn such a veil of illusion over this planet that it's very hard to know what the truth is. It's why great seers and visionaries and prophets have come to us, including personalities like Jesus, and have said, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free, because we are surrounded by deception and dissembling on every hand, concealment, secretiveness, lies, cover-ups. It's seamless. It's coast to coast, border to border, 24/7, nonstop, cradle to grave. So I think we're already in the Project Bluebeam scenario. We're already in the Truman Show. I know maybe you have, and maybe many of the people who are logging on to this interview have seen the Truman Show with the American actor Jim Carrey, where this guy only gradually becomes aware that his entire life is a Hollywood production. And everything that he's assumed that has been true and real his whole life has been a fictitious illusion. Everything, across the board from soup to nuts, has been a lie. And essentially, planet Earth is a huge intelligence operation. This was the whole point of the major point of the Matrix movie. We are born into a mishmash, a matrix of incredibly convincing, stupendous lies that ensnare us in the second that we slip out of our mother's womb. This net of lies and illusion, delusion, concealment, deceit, snatches us and surrounds us. So we're already in the Project Blue Beam scenario. The question is, how do we get out? And I already indicated that the exit lies on the inside. We have to go through our hyperdimensional DNA, access what we can of it, and activate our third eye, our heart chakra, our crown chakra. That's our get out of jail card right there.
Thank you, Richard. Cliff, about 4 days ago, on our forum, gave an alert on the forum regarding Comet Elenin. He said that the Elenin comet thing was really peculiar, and how the linguistics was being pumped up, and there was deliberate memering around this context that was, in itself, quite disturbing. The Camelot Roundtable and talk of Elenin has increased dramatically over the past month, and even over the past 3 months. What is your take on Comet Elenin and the fact that it will be coming closest to Earth around the October or the end of the Carl Kalleman Mayan calendar date?
I don't know enough to comment intelligently about the comet. What I can say is, from a variety of sources, not all of which I can comfortably talk about in an interview setting intended for public broadcast, indicate to me that this upcoming time period, starting from late September, running up toward the period of Christmas, is going to be a time of high drama on this planet for a variety of reasons. I think what I would have to say to people is get ready. Whatever preparations you're going to make them the best that you can. If you are intending to make a major life change, make it. If you're thinking, well, I'll wait till next year, don't. If you can do it now, do it. If you can't, well, then do the best you can. I don't know what more to say. Everyone's situation in life is different. You simply can't offer a one-size-fits-all prescription to everyone across the board, nor should I, nor should you. Everyone at the end of the day is responsible for themselves, for their family, for their own situation, for their own conditions, for their own preparations, for their own thoughts and actions. So all I can say is, from everything that I see, we all, individually and collectively, are going to go through, to live through, to experience highly momentous times in the coming months. Certainly later this summer, but for sure this coming fall and this winter in the northern hemisphere. Of course, understanding that here in the southern hemisphere, the seasons are reversed. But yes, over the coming half year, 3, 6, 9 months, big things are coming down the turnpike toward us. So whatever you have to do to get ready, seek your own inner guidance, seek your own outer guidance, both inner guidance and outer guidance. Prepare yourself the best you can in your situation wherever you find yourself. More than that, you can't do, and more than that, I can't say. I would add, however, that using the freight train on the railroad track analogy again, if you have the means to step off of the railroad track when you see a freight train bearing down on you, by all means do so. You are given feet for a reason, so use them and step aside. If you are able to save yourself, you have a mind to save yourself. I would certainly advise anyone, if you're able to preserve your own life. Life is worth living, and that extends to your family and other people close to you as well. You're here for a reason. You have a life for a reason, so live it and preserve it if you're feasibly able to do that. That's both your privilege and I believe also your responsibility. Now, I have come to South America initially on a vision quest, but decided to stay. I would say that if there are others who have the desire and the calling and the means, the financial means, to come to South America, you're certainly able to. I do know people with property to sell, including a couple of large properties, including one large, very nice estancia in Uruguay that runs to 2,500 acres. The asking price is in the low seven figures, but if an individual or group, this could be a group of people conceivably who would want to set up an intentional community in the Southern Hemisphere, now is the time to do it. And if a group wanted to get money together and come down and build houses and make an intentional community, I'm saying now, right now, is the time to do that. Not 5 years from now, not 3 years from now, not 2 years from now. What's going to be happening in the pretty near term is so big that if you're going to make a change, if you're going to establish a radiant zone or a safe haven or go to a safe haven, and if you were waiting for someone to tell you, hey, it's time to do that, well, I guess this is your wake-up call, and step to it, because time is a wasting. I may be contacted through my blog.
Yes, thank you. And I agree. Many on the forum actually do think that time is quite short, and that will lead to the data gap discussions in the next section. But for the moment, if you don't mind, we just have a quick 1 minute break. People have to go to the loo. Thank you. We're speaking with Richard Sauder. Please support him by purchasing his great books from eventhorizonchronicle.blogspot.com. Once again, that's eventhorizonchronicle.blogspot.com. The next section of questions is from the New Energies and Data Gap from Cliff's work. And the first question is Uranus.
I'm back, Richard. We're entering into a different part of the galaxy, one where the Earth and humanity has never been before. We will be, if not already, encountering different energies, and these may affect our Sun, the planets, the Earth, and of course humanity. How do you see or experience these new energies, and what have you been told, or what do you envision will be the effects of these energies?
Yeah, this is a very important and perceptive question. I agree with the premise that we are entering a new part of the galaxy, that there will be new energies coming into the Earth. In fact, these will be divine energies. We're already feeling the bow waves of these arriving waves, large divine waves of energy, knowledge, etc., that are coming our way, and people are intuiting that something is going to happen. Like any large wave, there'll be a certain amount of shock involved when it hits, or as it hits, and what is not able to ride the wave, so to speak, or to float on the wave will be smashed by it. Looks like that's what's going to happen. The wave knows its own, so to speak, and calls to them, and they respond. I had an interesting experience about 3 or 4 years ago where I laid down to sleep one night, and as soon as I laid my head down and closed my eyes, in that split second, I mean in 1 second, I immediately thought that I was dying first for about 5 seconds, and then I figured out I wasn't dying, that something else was going on, because such a dramatically violent vibration and shaking ensued that I thought, oh, this is it. I'm flopping like a fish, and the next thing I'll see will be the the big tunnel headed for the pearly gates. Well, it didn't quite work out that way. But the shaking was so violent that then I thought, well, this is an earthquake. We're having a huge earthquake, like a 8.0 or 9.0 or something. Well, I was living in San Antonio, Texas, at that time where you simply don't have earthquakes like that, not even small earthquakes. So after a few seconds, I decided, it's not that either. It's not an earthquake, and I'm not dying. So what is it? It was something that I had never experienced before. And I thought, well, I'm going out of the body. It's kind of like a mystical or a spiritual experience. And I've been out of the body many times, out of the body in the way that Robert Monroe or people like that would use the term. And then I figured out, no, this isn't quite that either. And then I thought, well, maybe it's the Kundalini, because I've had a variety of Kundalini experiences over the years, and some of them have been quite powerful. But then I decided, well, it's not that either. And all of this happened in 10 or 15 seconds, you see, and this was just a tremendous shaking, and the violence of it was just enormous. And then I intuited that the core of the earth was flipping. Let me repeat. I intuited the core of the earth was flipping. And I had tuned into that directly. Now, understand there are thousands of miles between the surface of the earth and the core of the earth. So whatever happens in the very core of the earth, all else being equal, has a certain time delay, and it's working out to the surface. I don't know what all of that entails. I just knew that I had immediate intuition that what was happening was that the very core of the earth was flipping, and that therefore everything else on the earth was, after a delay, a period of time, going to be, shall we say, turned topsy-turvy. So I'm expecting that there will be dramatic geophysical events, even more so than we've seen in recent years, months, and weeks. And that when people talk about a possible shift of the axis or a change in the physics, as one of my sources told me one day when I was asking him about the reason for making these vast secretive underground bases, and he said, I suppose one of the reasons could be a possible change in the physics of the Earth's rotation. So that is the kind of thing that I experienced when I lay my head down to sleep just a few years ago. And then I also examined that with reverse speech. With one of the better reverse speech analysts, not David Oates, but someone else who's very good, in my view, possibly as good or maybe even a little better in some respects. And one of the things that I said in reverse speech about this event was Elohim's inbound.
What does that mean then, Richard?
Well, Elohim, of course, is the plural word in Hebrew for God, gods. Well, so in reverse, I said Elohims. I don't speak fluent Hebrew, so I put the English plural ending onto Elohim. So it was my way of reversing, saying gods. So we're dealing with gods, a divine reality here. Inbound. Elohim's on the way. The gods are coming to earth.
Wow.
Which many other people have said. So two things are going to be happening, more or less simultaneously, or maybe first one then the other. And the one thing is that there is going to be cataclysm. In fact, natural catastrophes have already begun. Thousands of people in Minot, North Dakota, have been flooded out of their homes and have lost everything in the last 2 days. There will be more of that. There are people in Arizona who have been burnt out of house and home in the last 2 or 3 weeks. There will be more of that. There are people in Japan who in the last 3 months have lost everything because of the earthquake and the ongoing nuclear disaster. So there will be more of this in the United States, in Japan, and other countries. We have entered into a period of turmoil, trouble, catastrophe, and cataclysm. My suspicion is what the Bone Lady told me, what my dreams and visions have shown me, what other people are seeing in their dreams and visions, that we are going to have a lot more of this, and worse. Sad to say, probably much worse. At the same time, a lot of people are likely to be leaving this physical realm for a variety of reasons in a variety of ways, in large part because of these problems that have already started to set in, and that will come down on us with a vengeance in the coming months and in 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 years. Beyond that, understand that childbirth does have pangs, and that the outworking of a karmic cycle necessarily means, in a manner of speaking, there is a harvest of souls, to which I make allusion in my most recent blog posting. The final meter measures 0.999. It does appear there is a harvest of beings, of souls, of lives at the end of a grand age, and it appears, approaching the end of a grand age where old things are ending and new things will be beginning, very phoenix-like. And when the phoenix, when in the phoenix mythology you have a funeral pyre where the old is burnt to crisp, is incinerated, and out of the ashes the phoenix arises, new life arises out of the ashes. So the gods are on the way. I interpret this, through my subconscious as meaning, yes, a new kind of divine reality is going to come to this earth. The human race, those of us who remain, I don't know if I will, I don't know if you will, but some will, whether it's only 4 or 5,000 people or 4 or 5 million or 400 or 500 million, I don't know. But whoever remains will establish something new, a new way of doing things, a new way of thinking things, because the planet is going to go through terrific changes. And those people who remain on the planet necessarily will themselves go through terrific changes. Now, let me say also that in recent weeks I had a clear dream in which I was shown, I don't know if literally or symbolically or both simultaneously, what will be happening in the near term on this planet or for this planet or to this planet in the solar system. But first, the dream had 4 distinct scenes. In the first scene, in all of the scenes, I was out away from the Earth, further out in the solar system, so that I saw the Earth from hundreds of thousands, maybe a few millions of miles away. And I first saw an eclipse. I don't know what body was being eclipsed by another. But I saw an eclipse. And then after the eclipse, I saw an alignment of several planets, which I now know is this alignment that happened several weeks ago that was much in the news there for a couple of weeks. I wasn't aware of that planetary alignment at the time I had the dream. It happened about 3 weeks or so after I had the dream. After I saw the planetary alignment, which has now happened, come and gone, so to speak, I saw 3 Earths very clearly. And they were out of phase. I was watching them turn beneath me, rotate beneath me. But they were not in phase with each other. Each Earth was 120 degrees out of phase with the others. And after I saw that I saw many new planets enter the solar system until I counted, in a dream, I counted 32 planets. Of course, we're taught in school there are 9 planets in the solar system. Now, I don't know what this dream portends, whether the meaning of the dream is to be interpreted symbolically or literally or both. Now, I do know there are regularly eclipses in the solar system of all kinds. So I saw an eclipse in the dream. And then the planetary alignment I saw in the dream, which did outwardly physically happen and was very much in the news. As for the other parts of the dream, the 3 Earths, I don't know what that means. Could there physically be 3 Earths simultaneously in this solar system? It's hard for me to imagine how that would be possible. But what if? What if the Earth would split into 3? I don't know. There are many things I don't know. I can't say that it's impossible. It seems highly unlikely and extremely improbable. But what if? Or is it meant spiritually? Or is it meant that there will be 3 Earths, but in 3 different dimensions? I don't know. And then as for the greatly increased number of planets in the solar system, I saw other planets and planetoids entering the solar system, and there were 3 times as many planets as there are now. More than 3 times as many. Is this physically possible? I don't know. All I can say is stay tuned. Maybe things are about to become highly unusual, or maybe this is just a way of seeing different aspects of the Earth. Maybe it's the Earth's way of showing me that it has a physical level and also 2 other levels. Maybe it's the solar system's way of showing me, yes, there are these 9 physical planets, but maybe there are other planets that are spiritual, that are also here, that we don't notice because our spiritual vision is dimmed. So you see, there are many ways to interpret this dream, literally, physically, and on one level. Part of it is true that way, or symbolically, or spiritually, and there may be other ways as well of which I'm not aware.
Mm. Thank you very much for sharing that dream with us. I was also wondering if you think any of these changes might be karmic events, and also,
yes, ma'am.
You do.
Yes, there are. Yes, there are karmic events. The karmic burden of the human race on this planet is very heavy. And, what goes around comes around. And when you throw, over a period of thousands of years, when you keep throwing genocidal boomerangs of slavery, boomerangs of industrial slaughter called war, boomerangs of ecological destruction, boomerangs of economic exploitation, boomerangs of vicious raping of the earth. Don't you know that's a heavy karmic load? And it does appear that the universe has a yin and a yang side, positive and negative forces and energies, and that over time, everything balances out. Negative seeks positive, positive seeks negative, yin goes to yang, yang goes to yin, male is attracted to female, female is attracted to male, etc. So over time, everything balances out, including negative karma. And it does look like there's a rough patch in the road right about harvest time, meaning that this fall in the northern hemisphere does look to be a time when a fair amount of karma will, it has to be balanced somehow. And no one can balance your karma for you. It's your karma, it's your stuff. Only you can deal with your stuff. Only Americans can deal with America's stuff. How many countries has America bombed? How many countries has America invaded? America has, actually dropped atom bombs on another country twice. Need more be said.
Right. Yeah. It's going to be a tough time.
Nasty things. You can't do nasty things to other people over a period of centuries and thousands of years and expect that none of the shit will ever splash back on you. None of the blood from your victims will ever splash back on you. None of the radioactivity none of the radioactive hell that you have rained down on other people from 40,000 feet will ever rain back down on you. You can't do those things without repercussions. That's all I have to say.
Well, I think you're on the right track in your thinking, and it's unfortunate, but it's going to happen. But I also want to look to the future, and I was wondering about future generations and their change of consciousness, hopefully. And, what do you see as those phoenixes that are going to rise out of the ashes? How do you see them?
They'll be different genetically from us. For one thing, they'll have to be. We have so chemically contaminated the planet, and so many of the chemicals are interactive with DNA or cause DNA mutations, that in itself, our massive toxic chemical contamination of the ecological chain on this planet guarantees that coming generations will be genetically different from us. We have chemically altered the DNA. Also, because the radioactivity we are now spewing through our nuclear technology, and this assumes that nuclear war doesn't also break out in the coming weeks, months, and years. And it may well. But even if it doesn't, from the Japanese radiation alone, from Fukushima, from the depleted uranium munitions alone that the United States has fired all over the place in Iraq and Afghanistan, in Libya and Kosovo and other places, from those sources alone, and also from Chernobyl and the Ukraine, all of these continue to put out radioactivity in the environment, mostly in the northern hemisphere. That nuclear radiation in and of itself is even now mutating the human genome, human DNA. So for these reasons alone, our descendants will be genetically different from us. We are forcing them to be genetically different from us because of the sad decisions we have made.
Wow. Thank you very much, Richard. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Uranus Rising. Richard, in Cliff's work, there is a curious phenomenon called the data wall or hard stop. Cliff sees a time when his spiders find a drastic drop of data from March 2012 until there is no longer any data from May 2013 onwards. Some people speculate it could be due to a massive die-off of humanity. Some say the death of the internet due to solar flares EMP, and other theories include everyone suddenly becoming psychic and having no need to leak the future unconsciously in the present-day words. Interestingly,
none of that, those possibilities are not mutually exclusive.
Correct.
All of that could happen.
So, what is your take on what could be happening in that period or around that time?
I can extrapolate from what we see now, and that's all I can do. I do see a growing awareness on the part of a growing number of people as concerns a dire plight that this planet and the human race is in very large measure due to our individual and collective choices. Better late than never, but you know what? Sometimes too late is too late. So we may actually go extinct.
Yes, definitely.
A year from now or less. At our own hands, we may actually suicide as a race because of our own stupidity in less than a year from now. We possess the technology to do that, and we've already unleashed it We've deployed it all over the planet, and we've set in motion these automated military, digitally controlled machines by self-aware, artificially intelligent supercomputers. All of this is set up and ready to go at any split second before any of you or anyone listening to this says, yes, but I have nothing to do with this. Don't you? Don't you? Did you ever pay money to the tax agency in whatever country you live? Did you ever pay money to the military? Did you ever plug into this control system? Do you belong to those who are listening? Do you live in a NATO country, for example? Have you contributed to this military mayhem, even with $5 or £5 or €5? If you have, yes, you do. You have an ounce of flesh involved in this. So almost no one on this planet can say, oh, but I have nothing to do with it. Sure you do. Almost all of us do. We're all involved. Our hands are all in this. So we're all karmically involved. And we have contrived the means of our own racial extinction. It can happen at any minute. That technology exists and has for virtually my entire life. And I presume virtually the entire lives of many people logging into this broadcast. So it's possible that we could go extinct at our own hands through our own incomparable stupidity and our own fallen condition. It's also possible that in going extinct, that as a racial grouping, we would have a kind of joint soul review, if you will, and go jointly conscious. If the universe smiles on us, it might give us another chance and say, you know what, you totally trashed that perfect planet that God gave you. You totally destroyed that pure, pristine, perfect planet. But we're willing to overlook that. In spite of your wickedness and destruction, we're willing to overlook that and give you another chance. Look, here are 3 brand new Earths. We're going to put 1/3 of you on each one of these and see how you do this time. Because before we gave you 1, this time we'll give you 3. And maybe if we give you 3 chances, you'll get at least one of them right. That's one possible interpretation of what I saw in my dream. And then the other issue is as far as the internet going down, if there was an extinction event or a massive uprising in human consciousness, whether in the body or out, I'm with the people who say if you get to the point where everybody, or even 50% of everybody, or even 35% of everybody is so damn telepathic that they can read everyone's mind, the internet at that point pretty much becomes a dead letter and moot. And it would be like, why drive around in a horse and buggy if you could have a Ferrari?
True, very true.
Richard, we're going to move on to the relocating questions now, and I'll start with the first one. I understand you are now living in South America. I myself left the States 20 years ago after trying very hard to wake people up, but to no avail and my great cost. My decision was then to leave, so at least to not participate in that cultural national system, and have lived off the grid and below the radar since. We all have to lose some to gain some karma-wise. What positive suggestions can you offer, and what rewards can you envision to those who have the cojones to leave their comfort zone?
Well, that's an excellent question, and I would answer by saying that actually I was no longer comfortable living in the USA and being physically present in that system either, or even supporting it by living and working there. So in a very real sense, the USA was not a comfort zone for me. if it ever was. I felt very uncomfortable for most of my life, and one of the big reasons is because I lived in such a dark place and space called the USA. In reality, now that I'm here, I feel a greater comfort level in South America. I feel an overall greater sense of personal freedom. I would say that for me, just being out of the territory, just being physically out of the territory of the USA is a relief. So much so that I do not intend to return. In fact, nothing has happened that I have seen or heard of since I've left that has persuaded me to leave South America and go back to the USA. I am mindful. I remember very clearly how fast the former USSR, that is the Soviet Union, disintegrated 2 decades ago, and I wouldn't be surprised to see the USA similarly disintegrate some yet to be determined future month or year. In my view, the whole country at this point is a failed, oppressive, repressive, exploitive system, and it continues to maintain itself only through the massive imposition of police force at home and imperial military force abroad. I don't want to participate in that in any way, shape, or fashion, so I don't feel any pull for the place. I have, friends, associates, former neighbors, family members, etc., who live there, but I personally feel no pull for the United States of America. I find it interesting that Cliff High's webbots, that at least his analyses of what his webbots do suggest that USA model of governance may not survive much longer. And in fact, other bloated, corrupt, sprawling empires like it have bitten the dust in the past. And here I'm thinking most notably of the Roman Empire, which in its day was a vast and mighty force to reckon with, but it no longer exists. The whole thing just fell apart for a whole wide range of reasons. And I see the day coming when the same thing will happen to the USA. In fact, there are people out there right now talking about the Mayan calendar, Mitch Batros, Carl Kayeman, and others. There's some other websites, and some of them are saying as soon as within the next 2 weeks, you could see heavy events that will seriously erode the power, force, and influence, and ability of the USA to project its power, force, and influence over the rest of the world is going to be seriously eroded, that there are going to be major disruptive events coming for the USA. In fact, that has begun. We're seeing massive fires in Arizona and New Mexico. We're seeing huge floods already this year on the Mississippi and on the Missouri River, with a crisis in progress at nuclear power plants along the banks of the Missouri River in Nebraska and so forth. So, I share many of the same reasons you may have for leaving the USA. It took me longer to do it, though I thought about it seriously for many years. I finally left, and at a propitious moment, it appears to me.
Well, I think that's probably you came to the same conclusion after your vision quest as I did after mine. So thank you for your answer, and I'll hand it over to Unky Bubby.
Hello, Richard.
Hello.
This is Unky Bubby. Patrick had some technical difficulties, so I'll be asking the remainder of his questions for this segment.
I'm honored.
Okay, thank you. You seem to have been encouraging folks to relocate to South America, if nothing else by example. We've heard Carol Rawson's, one of Von Braun's assistants, talk about her experience opening a retreat in Ecuador, I believe, with the corruption and general harm that expatriates seem to cause to indigenous peoples and customs. Would you say your experience similarly tainted?
No, not really. For one thing, not all expatriates are the same. That said, my feeling is if anyone wants to move to another location on the planet of their own free will for valid personal reasons, including seeking a new phase in life, a new purchase in life, or simply to be free of northern hemisphere radioactivity that is going to be a problem from here going forward, then that's up to them. That is their choice to make. I would also add to that I have been very favorably impressed with the vast majority of the people who have written to me, especially in recent months. It's my judgment that, it's my observation, put it that way, that the people who read my writings tend to be thoughtful people. I would say more thoughtful than the general run of the population. In my case, I speak Spanish and have a degree in Latin American studies, and had previously studied, traveled, and toured in the Latin American region. So I had a sort of affinity or preparation for moving to South America before I came. I certainly, also in my case, am not harming indigenous people in South America. I would describe my life as a very ordinary life, conducting it in a very ordinary little town, quite a small town, in an equatorial third world country. I can tell you that it's a very quiet place, and if there are others who want the same thing, who want to do the same thing, who want to relocate to the Southern Hemisphere, in particular to South America, I see nothing wrong with that. I would also say that there are, to be sure, there's the so-called ugly American stereotype, and you do see those people in South America as well as in other parts of the world. I'm not encouraging anyone to go to South America or anywhere else, even to the next block, and to be rude and crude and impolite and ugly, exploitive, and exhibit that type of behavior. The people who so far have approached me about relocating to South America have, in the main, been considered responsible individuals. That's the way I have perceived them. That's the way they have presented themselves to me. And so I'm not overly concerned about it. And moreover, I'm not really encouraging one and all, everyone, to relocate to South America. For one thing, that's physically impossible. For another thing, the vast majority of people, 99% or more, simply won't do it. All I'm simply saying is that for those who are interested, able, and willing, that now is the time. Time is tolling, and big events certainly are coming up real soon in the coming weeks and months. So if someone is anticipating relocating, and in particular moving to South America, my recommendation is to hop to it, get right to it.
Makes sense and sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm going to go on to the Fortiana section on here, and the next question will be,
yes.
Your website describes that you have an abiding interest in Fortina, based initially on writings of Charles Fort from 1918 through the 1930s, described as a distinctive blend of mocking humor, penetrating insight, and calculated outrageousness. This seems to capture many facets of your personality. Can you share some of your favorite Fortina thoughts or insights?
Yes. Forteana has it gripped me years ago when I stumbled across Charles Fort's books and just read at them voraciously. Of course, he wrote encyclopedically, and I haven't read every page of everything he's written, but I at one point read a lot of it, and it was fascinating to me. Absolutely, it gripped me. What I took away from it in a nutshell is that nothing is as it seems. The world is not what it seems. The galaxy is not what it seems. In terms of this planet, it's like a sort of cosmic Grand Central train station, like an oasis out on one of the galactic arms, a type of watering hole or greater galactic caravan trading center, if you will, where different races, different realities, trade routes, timelines, dimensions and energies, both subtle and gross, and a whole lot of other stuff besides that intersect and mingle, conflict and blend, harmonize and clash, all producing a kind of cascade of novel and unusual phenomena and events of every conceivable description, and that is what Charles Fort exhaustively cataloged. This is a man who seriously went to the library and combed through everything he could find, newspapers, books, journals, you name it, and culled out all the unusual articles and events and phenomena and trivia and factoids that he ran across and compiled them in massive books, Lo, the Book of the Damned, and there are others. And what I find interesting in all of that is that not only that he did it, but these things are ongoing to the present day, and we all have front row seats. Even better, we all participate directly in this highly bizarre, unusual, and entertaining drama. It's a great school.
True. Absolutely true. The next question is, the Fermi paradox begs the question, if there's life in the universe, how come we aren't visited by aliens? Charles Fort once stated, I think we're property. Fort's solution is that the Earth was warred over in the distant past and now is under the control of something. All others are warned off. The reason that we never meet our owners is that they have no interest in talking with their livestock. Do you have an opinion on this thought?
Oh, I sure do. Number one, Charles Fort, I think, is right. This planet was warred over thousands of years ago, and for all I know, the war is ongoing, but there's a lot of evidence for so-called war inherent in the ancient past. As to the alien question, I think we are visited by aliens and have been for a long time. And it appears to me that as we go deeper into this question, not only into this question, into the century, that the so-called aliens or extraterrestrial will show themselves more clearly, or alternatively, we will simply see more clearly what is already being shown and notice their presence, so to speak. That we will collectively and individually open our eyes and see what is in front of us and understand what is being presented to us to understand. I also agree with Charles Fort that it does appear that we are under the control of something, at least for now. I surmise that something is the machine that I've spoken about in this interview and others, and have also written about to some extent, to some length on my blog site. And I also agree with Fort that this machine is a most formidable entity. It doesn't want to engage us in a dialogue. In fact, as Fort has observed, it wants to dominate us. It intends to subjugate us, and in fact it is to a great extent doing that, feeding off of us, and look around, destroying us in myriad ways, large and small, on every hand. So I think that the livestock analogy of Charles Fort is probably very apt.
Thank you. Fort supposedly burned his first book or books circa 1919 that suggests the Earth's humans were controlled by beings on Mars and possibly by a civilization on the South Pole. Were there any remnants of Fort's early work, and do you have any thoughts on beings living on Mars or the Moon, for that matter?
Yeah. I don't know if there are any remnants of Fort's early work. If there are, I haven't seen them. But my best guess is that there certainly are beings on the Moon and Mars, and I would also surmise that there are terrestrial black ops human factions on both the Moon and Mars. For the Antarctic, there is something highly strange and secretive going on down there. I don't know what that is. I did try to find out, and more than anything, I discovered, we'll put it this way, I kept running into a veil of secrecy that made it hard for me to find out the kind of information that I was wanting to research. There are a couple of agencies that, for the better part of a century, for more than half a century, have controlled quite a lot of what happens in the Antarctic, and those two agencies would be the United States Navy and the National Science Foundation in the United States. There's another agency called Antarctic Support Associates that for many years worked very closely with the United States Navy and with the National Science Foundation. Now I believe that their support function is being carried out by another organization. But those three agencies, for years, for decades, very closely controlled not only who goes to the Antarctic and where they go, but also what they do when they're there. Nothing has changed in that regard right up to the present time. So there's a real security curtain, a type of compartmentalization that's been drawn over the Antarctic and what is happening down there that's very hard to pierce. I would say that I can speculate with the best of them as to why that should be so. I've read a number of conjectures over the years as to what may be happening in the Antarctic that's being covered up, and my perception is that there is a kind of cover-up over what is happening down there or what has been discovered down there. And the reasons would include such things as a Nazi base of operations that would have been established back in the 1930s and 1940s and also in the immediate post-World War II period. Another possibility would be one or more extraterrestrial bases, some kind of time portal, whether a natural phenomenon associated with the distinctive physics that are peculiar to the Antarctic environment, or an artificial time portal that might have been constructed by terrestrial or non-terrestrial forces or presence. corridors to other dimensions. Perhaps there are monumental ruins from a pre-ice civilization, from pre-dynastic Egypt, for example, or from Atlantean times. There might be a Stargate. But at the end of the day, I truly do not know, because as I have told you, I try to look into what is happening down there and ran into some. There are blocks that any serious alternative researcher who is experienced and skilled at research will notice that after a period of time that it's hard to look into certain things in any depth with respect to the Antarctic. Maybe all of those things that I mentioned are true, and there could even be more things that haven't occurred to me and other researchers. I don't know. I tried to find out, and I couldn't. I ran into a wall of secrecy, but I'm pretty sure there's more, perhaps a great deal more, going on in the Antarctic than we've been told about, and probably things have been discovered there that we haven't been told about. I think there's a lot more happening in the Antarctic than ice sheets and penguins.
Excellent. Very interesting. Thank you very much, Richard.
You're welcome.
Richard, this is Uranus again, and we're going to move to the questions about karma.
Okay.
Last year, you protested at a nuclear facility, were arrested and served a sentence. You have spoken many times about how important it is to protest against the machine, as you call it. You've been calling others to also stand up to them, creatively and nonviolently, to work to individually counteract the actions of the machine, as Cliff High has recently admitted to in an interview with the forum here, but also to act against our collective negative karma. Is it time to man or woman up, even if it will hurt, will cost? Well, I'm very mindful of our collective karma, especially as one born in the U.S., and feel that there are some people who individually carry the burden of collective karma for others, at least until such time as others wake up to carry their own share. I would suggest that you are among their number and that it is a very, very heavy burden. So thank you. And would you speak in terms of our collective karma, especially those of us in the Northern Hemisphere, about how so many have avoided peering into our personal and collective shadows, avoided facing our shit, as you have said, much less entering into an initiatory alchemical process? And where have we colluded with the institutions of the machine? And I've heard you say recently that we will be possibly weeping radioactive tears as a result.
Yes, well, they already are in Japan, you see. In fact, just within the last day or two or so, I have read that the people in Japan are beginning to pass radioactive urine. So this is this is going to be our reality going forward. It's
Yes.
no trivial thing. This is the time that tries, balances, and weighs the souls of men and women. So, yes, the time has come. And it is time to walk the talk. It is time to put up or shut up. You could say that, a lot of people will tell you, I believe this, or I believe that, or I feel strongly about this issue or that issue. So now's the time to demonstrate that belief. If you have strong convictions, then you should be prepared to demonstrate that. Because the well-being of the planet and perhaps the very future habitability of the planet is very much in question at this time. That is very much in play and up in the air. I'll go a little further and say that hard times require hard decisions. Tough times require tough decisions. They require tough actions. In terms of my personal actions and my personal decisions, I can tell you that I have spent over a year and a half of my life in 12 different jails and prisons in 5 different states in the United States of America as a direct result of the various nonviolent demonstrations for peace that I have staged at various locations around the USA, most notably on the launch lids of nuclear missile silos in Arkansas, Missouri, and North Dakota. So I was jailed for all of that. You go over the fence, you go over the security fence, and there is a price to be paid. However, I determined that the price that we all would pay collectively, were there to be a shooting nuclear war, would be far higher than the price that any one man would pay being arrested, handcuffed, chained, criminally tried, publicly ridiculed, jailed, imprisoned, etc. That is a heavy personal price, and I won't sugarcoat
Very
it.
heavy, Rich.
I won't pretend it's easy. It's hard, but you know what? It's as nothing compared. If you want to know what hard is, contemplate the possibility of living through, if that can even be said, a global nuclear war. I shudder to think of that type of situation. So I've arrived at this conclusion, and it's implicit in what I have done and said over a 3-decade period. I went over the fence onto a nuclear missile silo in Arkansas in 1981. So I've done this over a 30-year period up into my mid-50s. At the age of 55, I went over a security fence onto a nuclear missile silo. So if there are people out there listening saying, "Oh, but I'm middle-aged," that's for a guy in his 20s. Oh, yeah? So the nuclear power plants have to go. How many of them have to melt down before we get that message? We have 3 melting down right now. 4, actually, if you count Chernobyl in the Ukraine, which already blew up back in the 1980s. Add to that the 3 in Japan, and it looks like we possibly might have 2 in Nebraska along the Missouri River any day or week soon. They're skating on the fine edge right now. So how many do there have to be before we get serious about this? So the nuclear power plants have to go. Ditto. In the case of missiles, they have to go. Either we get rid of them, or they're going to get rid of us. Coexistence is simply not a viable option. It's us or them. This really is the case, where it's one or the other. Long term, we cannot coexist, and perhaps not even short term, as the northern hemisphere continues to be more and more radioactively contaminated by the ongoing nuclear reactor meltdowns in Japan. So I am suggesting that concerned individuals use any and all peaceful, creatively, nonviolent means and methods at their disposal, individually and collectively, to hasten the day when nuclear missiles and nuclear power stations are relegated to historical footnotes. They have to go, but the problem is that the powers that be will not voluntarily get rid of them. Look what TEPCO is up to at Fukushima. Look what the government of Japan is doing. They're just lying. They're heavily in denial. They're temporizing. They're trying to protect the nuclear power industry. So they are the powers that be, the big corporations, TEPCO, General Electric, the governments of Japan, the governments of the United States, the Pentagon. They're not going to voluntarily get rid of nuclear technology. They won't do it. So if these things are going to disappear from the face of the earth, it will be through our actions. If they do not disappear from the face of the earth, that will likewise be due to our inactions. So that's our choice. The next move is clearly ours. We see what TEPCO is going to do. Nothing. Nothing. We see what the Pentagon is going to do. Nothing. So I strongly advise that whatever we do, that it be creatively non-violent. The machine, this sprawling, vast, planet-strangling machine, human race enslaving machine that I have discussed and talked about in my writings and interviews, doesn't understand nonviolence because it's foreign to its nature. And so it is our ace in the hole. Creative nonviolence, therefore, is an idea whose time has come, and we had some excellent forerunners in the 20th century, which we could talk about a little bit later in this interview if you like. Those being the White Rose movement in Nazi Germany during the Nazi period, World War II, and the Gandhi movement.
Yes.
Led by Mahatma Gandhi in India in the 40s and 50s, in the 30s and 40s, and also the nonviolent movement led by Dr. Martin Luther King and others, mostly in the American South in the 1950s and 1960s. And those were wonderful teaching moments for us. Shame on us if we don't take those three powerfully instructive, creatively nonviolent examples and adapt them to the very dire and pressing moment in our time. That said, the machine will lash out with, I'm telling you because I've personally experienced this, with handcuffs, chains, jail cells, prison cells, police, guns. Now they're using tasers. You name it. They're going to use it. They have it, and they will use it. So I don't and I won't minimize the violence that the machine and its minions can and do employ to preserve their power. They are ruthless. So that's the caveat. Creative nonviolence is for clear-thinking, courageous adults. It's not for the faint of heart. I repeat, I personally have spent more than a year and a half of my life in 12 different jails and prisons in 5 different states as a consequence of my nonviolent peace demonstrations. I've been handcuffed and chained more times than I can remember, and I've been locked into dozens of jail and prison cells, so many I can't remember all of them anymore either. So I won't minimize the enormity of the task that is in front of humanity. At the same time, I won't minimize the horror, and I emphasize the horror that confronts us if we fail to undertake this enormous task and succeed at it. So failure to act at this crucial juncture in history is not an option. That is why I went over the security fence at nuclear missile silos in North Dakota last year, in Missouri back in the 1980s, and also in Arkansas back in the 1980s. And having said all of that, I can't do it all by myself, and I shouldn't, and I absolutely will not. Others positively have to step forward, and I mean millions of others. Just have to. If they don't, we are pretty well toast. So now is the time. And I'll go further and say, if you were waiting for the time to act, if you were waiting for someone to tell you, you know what, it's time to do something, because 20 years from now it will be too late. It'll all be over by then, but the crying. 10 years from now is too late. 5 years from now is too late. 3 years from now is too late. 2 years from now is too late. This year. My God, the nuclear power plants are melting down. How deep into this do we have to go before people see it's a full-blown planetary crisis? Now is the time to act. Now is the time for all good women and all good men to come to the aid of their planet and to come to their own assistance. The powers that be will not be helping you. They will not be helping the planet. You will have to help yourself. You will have to help your home planet, because others are destroying it, and if you don't come to its aid, no one will. Now, in terms of karma, yeah, that means that there is a heavy karmic load. And I arrived at the point where I made the decision, and as a young man already, continuing right up into my middle age, into my middle 50s, that either you face it now in this lifetime, or you turn away and delay facing it until a future lifetime, and it will be even heavier. So much heavier, and so much harder, because we see, if we don't nip this in the bud, we should have nipped it in the bud decades ago. We didn't. So now that radioactive flower is beginning to blossom in our lifetime on our home planet. So if we turn away now, you know what, and say we're reborn, as many people believe we do, it does happen. Say you do reincarnate and you are reborn, you're going to be reborn onto a hell planet, onto a radioactive hell planet, to deal with the karma in that radioactive hell life that you didn't face now. So delaying failure to act, to my mind, is not an option. There's a planet to save while we still can, if we still can. There's a moment. There's a window of opportunity. Either we avail ourselves of it or we don't. So, as I've said repeatedly, and I will say again, one of the very best ways to do this is via creative nonviolence. And I think it's essential, because what the problem is destructive violence, rampant destructive violence. So logically, the antidote to destructive violence is creative nonviolence. That's the way you balance the karma. It's not so much a question of destroying karma as it is of balancing it and diffusing it. Leaderless, decentralized, spontaneous, creative, non-violence. There are so many ways to do this. In fact, as many ways as there are individual people. I actually think that one of the best ways is to quietly withdraw your participation and your cooperation from the system that the machine has put in place. So simply cease to cooperate. Creatively, for example, withhold your money from it. Withhold your votes from it. See, when you vote for these fake, hollow political machine candidates, you're giving them a quantum of your, voluntarily giving them a quantum of your life energy. So withhold your votes. Withhold your information, your personal information from it to the extent you can. Withhold your bodies, or your body in the case of any given individual, from industrial slaughter. from the military killing machines. This means that you wouldn't work for a military agency or organizations in a civilian or uniformed capacity. And if you do, you would resign your position because that position is incompatible with a humane existence on this planet. Likewise, if you work for a large corporation or big bank or financial institution, you would have to consider resigning your position, or in fact doing that, effectively resigning your position and walking away from complicity with that corrupt financial and economic order that is strangling us all. Moreover, you would stop pledging the allegiance of your body and mind to a multicolored piece of cloth hanging on a pole. And so these are just a few ideas. Of course, the Gandhian and Dr. King style nonviolent direct action that we saw. So I would say so beautifully displayed in the mid-20th century in India and in the United States are options for people who are bolder. And I know many people are bolder. Many people are ready to act. And so nonviolent sit-ins, nonviolent demonstrations, street theater, protest, art of all kinds, and other similarly creatively nonviolent ways of confronting or demonstrating or standing up to the machine can be used actively or passively to not cooperate with this planetary slave system that the machine has put in place on the Earth. I'm thinking as well, and it came to me as I was reflecting on what I have done over the decades, actually, and what I think many other people are doing or are rapidly tending towards right now is a kind of not doing. I really think it is in the sense of the teachings of Don Juan and Carlos Castaneda. For all of those many people, millions, who read the many books that Carlos Castaneda wrote about his apprenticeship with the Mexican Indian shaman or sorcerer, whatever you want to call him, named Don Juan. One of the principal teachings of Don Juan to Carlos Castaneda was not doing, in order to interrupt this routine of the world that has us all in its thrall and is turning us into kind of machine-like biological robots or automatons. You have to disrupt that routine, and one of the ways you do it is by not doing the things that you routinely do. You begin to not do it. And so I think that we have arrived at the point of creatively, non-violently, not doing things that we formerly did. And not doing these things, inevitably, as it did for Carlos Castaneda, will lead to greater clarity of vision. It will enable us to more clearly see, and I mean that in the sense that Don Juan used it as well, and Carlos Castaneda. It will enable us to see better what's going on, what to do, our part in it, how to disengage, how to create creatively nonviolent, create alternative ways of living and acting and being human individually and collectively on this planet. So as you do not cooperate, as you do not go along to get along, you do indeed begin to see a whole lot of things far more clearly.
Correct, yes.
So an important part of the esoteric teachings of Carlos Castaneda as related to him by Don Juan, in my view, turns out to have a very practical social utility. Now, I know in his books, and I read them all, avidly I might add, this is not a point that he made, either he nor Don Juan, but I am. So I would extend that teaching from the individual level to the societal level and say that as more of us do not cooperate, do not do the things that the machine must have us do in order for it to function, or rather for it to dysfunction from the standpoint of a sane, healthy human being, that in the process of not doing those things and not cooperating, the individual sees much more clearly, and it shifts the focal point of their whole life. And as more and more individuals do that, and as their individual life focal points shifts, there comes a point when enough of them have shifted that the societal focal point shifts. And if we don't do that, we're on a collision course with disaster, as things stand now.
Yes.
So,
yes.
As I see it, a concerted not doing, a massive not cooperating with our own enslavement is the only way out for us. We have to not cooperate with the central banking, debt-based, imperial warfare model of running the planet, or should I say, ruining the planet. And that will mean there will be more people than just Richard Sauder going over security fences onto nuclear missile silos. That will mean a whole lot of people are going to have to stand up and get in the face of the nuclear power industry, and on and on. That will mean a whole lot of people are going to have to opt out of paying the IRS, out of paying back onerous federal student loans, out of paying back these home mortgages. There's no way around it. Now, is there great risk in people doing this? There is huge risk. But the even greater risk lies in not doing it. So the bottom line is, I won't pretend for a minute that it's easy to stand up. You know, the nail that sticks up gets hammered. And that's the way it is. However, if we don't show the courage of our convictions, and lots of us, individually and collectively, and I mean a whole pile of us, begin to do the types of things that I've done repeatedly, again and again, then our fate on this planet is a most dark one. However, if we do decide to not do the things that the machine requires that we do, you see, that's a bad thing. So we have to, in order to get, we're deep in the slimy stuff, man, the stinky slimy stuff, and we're going to have to hoist ourselves up. It's going to be hard. It's going to be messy. I won't pretend otherwise, so let's get started.
Yes. And your explanation is so clear, and I hope people really take it to heart. Thank you. But unfortunately, recently Cliff has been seeing in the immediacy data that people are entering into a I don't want to know syndrome. That a huge portion of the global population are sort of backing away from the doom and humanity's in the earth situation. Do you think it is human nature, or perhaps increased mind manipulation, that people are wanting to remain infantile and avoid the responsibilities of adult decision-making and action and a mature spirituality, or could it be something entirely different? I'm just can't believe this is coming up.
Yeah, well, it is, and I can't say for certain because I can't get into every individual's head. It's probably some of all of that, but it is a problem. I've noticed it. It certainly is something that has crossed my radar. That's why it's even more important to speak up and to stand up, to act creatively and non-violently. I would say that, in fact, our situation is so serious that type of inaction, what I perceive, frankly, as a studied indifference and a willful, feigned ignorance, these things are simply not an option for adult human beings who understand what is happening. Yeah. And I'm sorry, people just have to get over it. That's the hard reality of the situation. Snap out of it.
Yes, well said. And then we've got the very real possibilities of the sun soon dramatically behaving in different ways and with possible sun disease and earth calamities. I heard you speak something about this, but I wanted to know more. Would you speak of the karmic feedback loop between the sun and humanity? And what do you think about any positive outcome, hopefully, even if it's for future generations?
Yeah, I do think that there is a feedback loop between the sun and humanity because the sun is such a vastly aware entity. It's the presiding entity in this solar system, meaning that it sees and knows what we are doing here on Earth.
Yeah.
For me, I think the positive karmic outcome is that it has the capability on any given day to cleanse the planet and reset our game back to start, to reset it all the way back to start with a new batch of humans, having burnt most of the former batch to a cinder. I think you would call that tough love. You don't want to take care of the planet? Well, you know what? It's one of my planets, and I want to take care of it. So here's what I've seen what you have done. Now I'll show you what I am going to do. And I would add also that some years ago, I had a vivid dream about the solar system in which it was a clear dream, a near lucid dream, in which I saw the sun and saw clearly that it's very aware. And I saw the planets orbiting around the sun also with a type of awareness. But the sun is the presiding entity in the solar system. There is a hierarchy in the sun, and the sun is at a higher position in the hierarchy than the planets. But the planets are also individual aware entities in their own right. Nevertheless, I saw the planets in orbit around the sun, and I saw that essentially the relationship of the sun to the planets is much like that of a large brood sow to her little piglets. And if you've ever seen a big brood sow, huge, fat, they weigh 300-400 pounds, they're enormous. And they go oink, 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 and they lay there and grunt while the piglets run all around in circles, leaping and tumbling all around their mother, and from time to time come and suck at her big, fat, swollen teats. And then when they have enough, they go off and run and play again, and they jump all over and crawl all over her, and she just lays there and grunts and smiles contentedly while they whirl around her dizzyingly. And I saw that the relationship of the sun with the planets is something like that. The sun sustains the planets. It provides abundant energy, far more than the planets need all that the planets need and far more. Out of its concern and care and love for the planets, it showers its love and energy and awareness and attention on the planets. It knows they're there. It's aware of them. It cares for them. It's concerned about them. By the same token, the planets are aware of the star around which they're orbiting, and aware of their subordinate status to it. And so I had that very, very real awareness. That is the kind of relationship that our home planet has to the sun, like that of a young, energetic piglet to the mother hawk that has birthed it and sustains it and gives it nourishment and protects it to a certain degree. And so yes, we do, as a species, a sentient species, not as sentient as we could or should be, and maybe will be in the future, but as a somewhat sentient species resident on a planet in a solar system orbiting around a parent star, we also are part of that feedback loop, and the parent star is aware of our presence on this planet and of what we are doing to it and to each other. And there is a karmic feedback loop.
Thank you again for your clarity and your vision. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Richard, you call for mankind to upwise. That is, we should strive for wisdom, creative nonviolence, peaceful cooperation with the natural planet and other humans of goodwill to combat the machine. Can you give us some practical day-to-day advice and perhaps some advice for us to pass on to less than aware family and friends to help them in the cause?
Yes, and the first thing I would say is that less than aware people may not be interested by definition, so that it may not be productive for us to waste a lot of time on them. Therefore, instead of worrying what they are doing and thinking, it's more productive for us to be about our own business, because ultimately I have to answer for myself and you have to answer for yourself. Neither you nor I have to answer for them. They will have to answer for themselves. Understanding these things in terms of practical actions, I would reiterate, pull your money out of the big banks. They are criminally corrupt. Don't aid and abet organized crime with your money. Pull your money out of the big banks. Don't go to war. War is nothing but industrial mass murder. So who in their right mind wants to be involved with that on any level? In terms of personal survival or personal karma or any other reason. So don't go to war. Thirdly, in my writings and in my interviews, I have pointed out that effectively this is the year of the Jubilee. Now, in ancient Judeo-Christian tradition, the year of the Jubilee was a periodic year in which debts were forgiven across the board on a societal-wide basis. So this is a time of forgiveness of all odious and onerous debts. Onerous debts, crushing debt, burdensome debt that can't be paid back, that cannot feasibly be paid back. Odious debts, illegal, immoral, unethical debts, where one party is not acting in good faith from the very beginning, and therefore the contract is null and void. And this principle is an ancient principle under Anglo-American jurisprudence, where one party to a contract enters into the agreement in bad faith, mendaciously. The contract is therefore null and void for that reason from the very beginning. So people are going to have to be creative in forgiving themselves of odious and onerous debts. The big banks aren't going to do it. The IRS is not going to do it. The Federal Department of Education isn't going to do it. The International Monetary Fund is not going to do it. The World Bank is not going to do it. So be it credit cards, mortgages, student loans, all of this, the slavers, the banksters won't free us. We will have to free ourselves. And we have to understand that this entire current economic system is a criminal slave system. Slaves who want to be free have to run away to freedom. Slave masters rarely, if ever, simply say, you know what, it makes me so sad that I'm a slave owner, so I'm going to free all of my slaves. Doesn't happen that way. So it's time for a Jubilee year. If you want to be jubilant in your life, do you want to have real Jubilee and glee back in your life again, then you're going to have to free yourself. And I think that more and more people are saying this. Actually, millions. You see evidence of this already with here and there. People very creatively. I read an article here recently where a family went down and foreclosed on a bank. They tried to foreclose on their house, and it was an illegal foreclosure. So they went down to the bank and foreclosed on the bank with their attorney, and try to have and call the sheriff to chain the doors of the bank shut. I like this spunk. I like their spirit. I like their style. That is one kind of creative nonviolence. It's a kind of jiu-jitsu where you take the banksters' evil karma and boomerang it back against them. I think there's plenty of room for more people to do more and more of those kinds of things. And we have the case of people coming out of the universities with thousands of dollars, even tens of thousands of dollars of student debt. But you know what? The economy is crashing. There are no jobs for university graduates. So there you are. You come out of the university with $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 worth of debt. You have a university degree. You can't find a job. The federal government, the bank, whoever is saying you have to pay. And you say, I don't have any money. I don't have any job. And they say, you know, too bad. You must pay. We're going to force you to pay. You can see that the only way out of this situation is to run away, because the only other alternative is slavery, and no sane person can be a slave. No one who wants to be free can be a slave, and yet this is precisely the situation that millions of people are facing. I haven't exaggerated in the slightest. So these agencies, whether they're government agencies or financial organizations and institutions, Wall Street firms, banking houses, etc., make a living out of sucking our life juices. They get juiced off of us, so they'll never set us free. We have to force the issue, but in this sense, creatively and nonviolently, and free ourselves. That is just the way it is.
Thank you for that.
Richard, this is Vito, and I just wanted to thank you for your true passion that you have for mankind. It's wonderful what you do. And in this part of the interview, we're now going to move to the spirituality and life section. And earlier, you were noting the White Rose movement. I was wondering if you could expound upon it a bit, maybe a little of its prior history, but more importantly to me, what are their plans, if they are still in existence, for the immediate, near, and long-term future?
Yeah. First of all, let me say that for those who don't know what the White Rose is, the White Rose had their genesis in the Nazi period, back in the World War II era, in Nazi Germany itself. A group of very courageous university students and professors banded together quietly, secretly, because the Nazi regime was a very harsh totalitarian dictatorship. So they organized themselves very quietly and began peacefully leafleting against the war and against the Nazi totalitarian regime. They did this for a period of time until they were found out, they were discovered, and many of them were arrested, put in prison, tortured. Some of them were executed for opposing and for speaking out, not only against the war itself, but against the Nazi government as well. But that was a wonderful example of the white rose, and the symbol was the white rose. There have been others down the years since the World War II era who have similarly acted in the spirit of the white rose and adopted the ethic and the symbolism of the white rose for their actions and for their philosophy. I am one of those persons. I will tell you that then, as in now, there really is no central white rose organization in the sense that you would find presidents, vice presidents, a secretary, meetings with notes, a treasurer, and so forth. It's all completely decentralized and leaderless. If you place a white rose in your hand and you act peacefully, courageously, creatively, nonviolently, then you are a bona fide member of the White Rose. So there are no membership dues. You don't have to be voted in. There is no initiation. But you do know the White Rose by its blossom, so to speak, because its objective is always for peaceful relations between nations, always for a cessation of warfare, as well as for a free or freer social order within national boundaries.
Well, very good.
I would add to that peace and liberty are also things that the White Rose promotes, always nonviolently. And I would reiterate that you cannot bring peace to the world through warfare, which is nothing but industrial slaughter. That is a logical impossibility. I'm reminded of the words of the ancient Roman writer Tacitus, who remarked at one time upon observing the bloody excess of the Roman legions in action, that, and I quote, "They created a desolation and they call it peace." And that's what we're faced with. I'm not talking of creating peace through warfare or through violence. In fact, you can't. And that's the point that Tacitus was implicitly making. If you want a peaceful world, if you want a nonviolent social and international order, then the only way to achieve that is through creative nonviolence. The means and the methods that you employ will determine and create the end result you obtain.
Okay. Well, Richard, tell me, something I've been wondering for quite some time is there anything that you've learned of, for whatever reason, maybe your safety, you have not published in your works? And if there are any of these items, can you maybe hint at what those kind of things might be so as to awaken us so we can do some research on our own?
Yes, I have learned some things that I will not talk about.
Okay, fair enough. I'll pass the ball on now to Patrick.
This is Unky Bubby sitting in for Patrick again. Richard, hello.
Hi.
You mentioned that in addition to your skills and research, that you rely on visions to guide your work and life. Can you describe what the nature and content of your visions are?
Yes. I can make it real short to begin with. I am concerned about the period that lies just ahead of us. And I mean, like tomorrow and the day after that. Our situation is so serious that what we do now has an effect on what the future will be. And my vision tells me that we have to minimize the degree of radioactivity, that those who are going to survive the upcoming massive turmoil will have to contend with. This is an imperative, the number one priority. If we don't do that, then my inner knowing is telling me, oh, there's not much of a future for me or for thee.
Speechless there for a moment. I'm sorry. In past writings, you spoke against the use of psychoactive drugs and plants, but your recent accounts of an ayahuasca experience suggest that there might be some value. Do you have any thoughts on this, perhaps reflecting on Terrence McKenna, John Lash Lamb, or others that were inclined to venture out of the box?
Sure. Though I'm not sure what writings you're referring to, and I have to admit, I've written so much over the years that I don't remember every sentence and every paragraph of every article, book, and interview that I've written. But I can say that in my extremely lengthy article, which thousands of people have read, entitled "Who Wants to Be CEO of a Red, White, and Blue Kakistocracy?" and that's spelled Kakistocracy, capital K-A-K-I-S-T-O-C-R-A-C-Y, that I wrote back in the summer of 2008, that I very specifically advocated for the sober use or ingestion of ayahuasca, iboga, and like entheogenic plants in order to upwise, if you will. I do see these sacred medicinal plants as having very great value when used reverentially and sacramentally and therapeutically. They can be tremendously helpful. They have been to me and to myriad others, right down through the thousands of years of history that precede the present day. So that has been my view on the so-called medicinal, psychotropic or entheogens, entheogenic plants for years. I have to say I don't have the same favorable view of the chemically synthesized and refined drugs and narcotics such as heroin, cocaine, ecstasy, LSD, methamphetamine, and so forth. And that may be what you're referring to. In the past, I have expressed a similar view to what I'm telling you now.
Those are, like you said, synthetic and unnatural, so that makes sense.
That's right. The ones that are synthetically created, artificially concocted in chemical laboratories, and usually most of these are trafficked by criminal syndicates. I'm not keen on either the criminal aspect of it or the artificial chemical nature of these. For me, the natural plant-based entheogenic substances, brews, what have you, have an altogether different effect on human consciousness. They're more integrative, they're more natural, they're more spiritual, they're more alive, they're more aware. For example, when I drank the ayahuasca brew, I very much have a feeling of being engaged with another vast, inscrutable intelligence that is interacting with me on a conscious, well, really a hyperconscious, hyperdimensional level. In other words, it has a fuller, more satisfying, I would say, biological field to it, the kind of feel that a DNA-based intelligence has. And to me, that is far more satisfying and fulfilling and self-actualizing, uplifting.
Well, thank you. In a recent article, you mentioned that you had not revealed your latest vision, I mean, only the import of various recent ones. Can you share your recent visions?
Not the most recent one.
Okay.
It's personal.
I understand.
We're speaking with Richard Sauder. Please support him by purchasing his great books from eventhorizonchronicle.blogspot.com. Richard, your answer is actually interesting, and it probably goes into this next question in my line of thinking, a philosophical question. Since you have now taken the ayahuasca brew, this question delves into the nature of spirituality in life. Firstly, what is your opinion on destiny and free will? How much control do we really have in shaping our future? We hear people like David Icke, who's also taken ayahuasca, stating that we can manifest anything we want in the world, while others state that we made a choice to be born in this 3D world at this period of time to learn lessons. So the future maybe can be tweaked slightly, but it's pretty much set in stone. What is your take on this question, destiny or free will?
Yeah, I don't think the future is set in stone. I think it's malleable. I also think, obviously, the present is malleable. Your life is nothing but one big decision tree. Will I get up in the morning, or will I stay lying in bed? Will I turn right at this intersection, or turn left, or go straight ahead? Will I get married or remain single? Will I have children or not have children? Will I work at this job, or will I be self-employed? Will I move to South America, or will I buy a house next door to an exploding nuclear reactor? So I very much believe in free will in this sense. Your will is as free as you want it to be. Now, understanding there are many people who are essentially just biological robots operating on matrix-created biological software, if you want to put it that way. And for people like that, and I just described hundreds of millions of people, maybe even 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 billion people. A very large percentage of the human race are on autopilot. They're essentially something like biological robots, just performing under the imperative of a program that's been put in them by the matrix, or by their ancestors, or by the culture to which they've been born. And for those people, no, there's not very much free will. But you know what? In many cases, those types of individuals don't want free will. They prefer to just go along to get along. But for those who do want free will, who do desire it, who see not only the utility of it, but its deep importance at a soul level, then yes, for them, there's as much free will as they care to have. Now, for that reason, the future is malleable, just as the present is, for those who see the possibility of needing, in the sense of K-N-E-A-D-I-N-G, needing not only the present, but the future. It lets you knead a big piece of dough. If you're going to make rolls or bread or something like that, you knead the dough. And then you bake it to create whatever pastry you're going to make, or bread, whatever. And So in that sense, I see that the future is not at all fixed. It's as free and as changeable as awake and aware and conscious beings would like it to be. So what ayahuasca did for me is reveal that the entire cosmos is hyper-consciously aware from the micro level to the macro level. The question for thinking beings then is not so much, is anyone listening? Hell yes, the entire universe is listening. The question becomes, do you have anything to say? Do you have anything intelligent to say or to add or to do? Anything creative or interesting? Anything uplifting or enlightening? It is your privilege and responsibility to add your quantum of enlightened, intelligent, self-aware life energy to the all that is.
Richard, this is Uranus again. I'm curious as to how you walk the tightrope between personal freedom in a self-actualized way, such as speaking out against the mind manipulations in the machine, versus giving space to others, space that allows them to arrive at whatever choice it is in their free will and destiny to make. I say this bearing in mind that to some people who are under enormous mind manipulations, and given that we live in a society where true spiritual courage has been discouraged, if not beaten out of us, then when we speak of what is really happening in the world, it may be perceived by people as us imposing views on them, views that they have not arrived at themselves as self-actualized persons. So to them, it might be experienced as yet another mind manipulation or like some sort of concussion conversion. And I just wondered how you walk that tightrope.
I could best answer with this example and then elaborate with some of the thoughts that follow from that. When you see an arsonist with a box of matches about to burn your house to the ground, do you worry in the slightest about imposing your views, contrary views, on the arsonist for fear that you might interfere with his free will? Or do you take direct action to prevent the arsonist from burning your house down? I think the answer to that question is obvious. So it then behooves us, when people reach such a level of recklessness that they place the entire planet and the entire human race at risk, along with most of the other higher life forms on the planet, that they're practically begging to have some adult guidance and supervision. Under those circumstances, it behooves us to step in and provide guidance and supervision of the adult sort. I am humbly suggesting that that guidance be applied nonviolently, creatively, and as peacefully as possible, since silence and inaction under that set of circumstances are not an option. Because permitting other people's so-called free will to destroy the planet, whether wittingly or unwittingly, is lunacy. If for no other reason than that I also live on this planet, and you do, and many other innocents. So what I'm saying is that I also have free will, and I object to that. my free will trumps their free will. That's a judgment I've made. That's a value judgment I've made. I further insist on my right to object, being superior to their right, their perceived right to destroy the planet and the living creatures on it. I further insist on my right to act nonviolently and creatively, to inject a modicum of sanity into what is otherwise an insane downward spiral to mutual annihilation. That is what grown-ups do. We do not have the luxury of a lot of time, frankly. Many millions of people are going to get a shock conversion, a shock, S-H-O-C-K, shock conversion anyway, as the universe is swiftly going to be kicking an awful lot of them to the curb. So my perspective is that it's much better for them. It's actually a kindness to them that their shock conversion should come from a fellow member of the human species who is engaging in an act of creative nonviolence. It's far preferable that a great many millions of these sleepwalkers be awakened, if possible, by their fellow human beings, preferably fellow human beings who are personally known to them. So creative nonviolence is that tool that you would use to creatively awaken these, Lord knows, billions of functionally fast asleep alleged human beings who are sharing this planet with us. And I would go further and say that my feeling is that it's a mark of deep respect for others to care enough to communicate to them, if only by implication, that there is every expectation that they also have a responsibility to behave as adults and to face the reality that they, after all, have also helped create and are complicit in. When you examine that soberly, you can see, if you're honest, that to do otherwise is to be effectively condescending to them, to regard them as inferior or somehow lesser, as not able or worthy to also assist in a mutual planetary rescue effort. We're going to need everyone, as many people as we can muster. So it's much better to regard these other humans as equals, who are equally, therefore, equally obliged to address the dire crises that we all face. In that sense, I have little comprehension of the rampant, feigned ignorance that we see on every hand. It's true that many people do appear to be little more than pre-programmed biological robots on culturally conditioned autopilot. But we have reached the point where that is simply not good enough. It's time to wake up. I'm like a big alarm clock, as if melting down nuclear reactors in Japan were not enough of an alarm clock. If even one person is listening to this audio cast, or 1,000 people, or 10,000 people, for whatever reason, were in any doubt that it was time to wake up, well, I'm here to remove all doubt. It's time to wake up.
Richard, I just want to say I very much respect your clear discernment abilities and your courageous conclusions. I do not disagree whatsoever with what you're saying. I also get a very clear idea of what you envision if we don't do things. But I want to pose this final question to you. Do you feel it's important that we hold compassion and understanding for those people that just can't do it, just can't go down the rabbit hole, and they may be under such manipulation by the machine that they can't possibly come out of it? But the question I have is, do you feel it's part of our really loving responsibility that we carry for and towards others, that we have some compassion for them while still going after your very clear call for action? That we hold this this compassion itself, because it's perhaps one of the deepest soulful qualities of being human. And I wonder if that in itself could be another way of contradicting or resisting the machine.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And compassion is important. However, so often compassion manifests as pity. And at root, pity is condescending.
Absolutely.
I don't mean to condescend on anyone. At root, the greatest compassion you can have for someone else's suffering is to enable them to resolve their suffering. And we are in a situation now where the only way we can resolve our suffering is to change our ways dramatically. And for that, we need everyone. And sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do, even as a parent, for a child, is to show tough love.
Mm-hmm.
There is a time and a place for tough love. And the person, the tough lovey, if you will often be want to say, well, if you really loved me, you wouldn't do that. If you really loved me, you wouldn't say that to me. Well, in fact, if you really did love that person, you would say something like, you know what? If you don't wake the you-know-what up, if you don't stand up and snap out of it, you're going to be glowing in the dark, and your children. And that's the good part of it. That's just the good part of it. The bad part of it is the rest of the planet is going to die, and it'll be the end of humanity, and it'll be the end of the biosphere on planet Earth. So I'm sorry. Stop feeling sorry for yourself. Stop pretending like you don't know what's going on. Stop pretending like it certainly doesn't have anything to do with you, like you're not involved, like it's not your place to do anything about it. We've arrived at the point where all of this needs to be said, and those who don't want to hear it are going to have to hear it, because the alternative is far too grim. You know, we've reached that fork in the road that the Hopis have been talking about for centuries, including in the 20th century and now in the 21st century, where we really do have to choose. Are we going left or right? If we continue down the path that we've been on for thousands of years now, it doesn't end well. It does not end well, and the Hopis have been very clear about that. If, on the other hand, we turn the other way and go down another road characterized by nonviolence, peace, no warfare, not exploiting each other, honesty, fairness, harmony, cooperation, then our future is much brighter. Dare we say it, even prosperous? carefree, loving, joyful, jubilant. However, if we don't do that, then there will be suffering and plenty of it. There will be gloom and doom and an awful lot of it. I hope you have been clear about that. That is a frank analysis of our situation, a frank prediction of what will happen according to what we do or do not do. I can't say any more clearly what I have to say. I can't do any more openly than what I have done. The Hopi could not possibly say any more clearly what they have to say than they have already done. So there it is. What remains to be seen is what we individually and collectively do. The choice is stark. It's clear. There's really not any in between here. Either we kill the plant or we rescue the plant. Either we, commit mutual radioactive hara-kiri, among other things, or we don't. So I've cast my vote. I went again and again and again over the fence onto the nuclear missile silos in the United States, and I've done other things, and I've written many statements over the years, issued many public statements, so there's no question as to where Richard Sauder stands, what he's done, what he advocates. That's no longer in question. I have cast my vote resoundingly for one and all to see, to observe, and to draw whatever lesson, object lesson that you may care from it. What remains to be seen now is what others will do, and I leave it to others. The most compassionate thing I can do at this point is to say, look, I give you an example of my thinking, my philosophy, what I have done, what I have said. Do with it what you will.
That is absolutely amazing. Thank you. And I sincerely hope that we have provided you with an opportunity to be heard by many people.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you for your time tonight, Dr. Sauder. Hope you enjoyed it as we did. If not, bad luck, mate. The 18th century writer Johann Wolfgang von Goethe said, "A creation of importance can only be produced when its author isolates himself. It is a child of solitude. Unfortunately, it seems a necessity of universe that people of great importance must walk a solitary path. It seems that only from this isolation can great ideas be discovered. Though the road seems lonely at times, Richard, it only seems that way, as your work has influenced many to walk down the right path behind you. On behalf of Fox and all the members of the WebBot Forum, we thank you, sir. In our tradition, may you and your family have many pies to come."
Thank you, Jules. Thank you. Thank you. I want to thank all of you.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
Likewise. I appreciate your time. I know that you invested fully as much time in this interview as I did, not only recording it, but also preparing for it. And I'm grateful for your time and your thoughts. I would reiterate, these are very good questions, and I think the quality of your interview, I actually think you guys are the new generation. You're the new cutting edge.
Fantastic.
Thank you, Dr. Sauder.
Thank you and good night.
Okay.